All right, cats, shut up. We're starting the show. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Pylon Show. This is just a ridiculously awesome episode that just fell together. I didn't do anything to deserve this, but thank you guys for coming on. It's going to be a great show. Let me introduce my guests first real quick, and then we will get into everything else. You guys know Nathanius and Katz. How are you guys doing?
Fantastic. Life is great.
Yeah, it's going to get better as well. And then, of course, we have Tim Morten. Tim, why don't you introduce yourself for anyone who doesn't know who you are, which would mean they've lived under a rock for a long time.
I was the man behind the curtain. I am no longer, but I was the production director for StarCraft 2 for about 5 years, and I am on the outside now.
Yeah, it's Tim is an unbelievably, well, you're still unbelievably important, but in StarCraft 2 terms, 5 years running the whole show. Pretty badass. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. And of course, Adrian, can you introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, I am the ex-WCS commissioner. I left Blizzard in October. Before that, I ran WCS for 3 years. And before that, worked on it as part of the team, was at IPL before that. Go back to the roots of StarCraft 2.
That's right. So two very important people who are unfortunately no longer with Blizzard, or fortunately, depends, I guess, what lens you want to put on that to look through. But thank you guys for coming on. It's going to be a great show talking about StarCraft 2 in the future and what's going on. But let me quickly run through our sponsors here. Of course, if you like the Pylon Show and you want to support it, and maybe you want to ask these guys some questions, well, you need to be a Patreon supporter. Go to patreon.com/The Pylon Show. And if you do support, you can go ahead over to thepylonshow.com and drop a question, which we will answer at the end of the show. We also have some new forums on there on the Nexus, so check it out. Everything you need as far as Pylon Show goes is at thepylonshow.com. Also check out matcherino.com/The Pylon Show. And type in our code for this week. It's It Burns, because apparently it is National Hot Sauce Day, Month, Week, something like that.
That is actually pretty cool, though. Can we talk about that for 1 second? Because
yeah, of course.
I know, like, I am really into hot stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
So in the StarCraft community, I can tell you the ranking as far as I know. Okay.
Yes.
Of like spiciness tolerance. Now, number one, undisputed, has to be Scarlet. Okay.
Really?
Okay, Scarlet is absurd at eating hot stuff. We ate ghost peppers together, and she did not give a fuck. Like she like not even flinch at ghost peppers. I was like, oh, holy shit, I need some milk.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
The rest of the ranking doesn't really matter. I went with Roddy once to Buffalo Wild Wings though, and we did the spicy wing challenge thing, and we both broke the record, but it was pretty early in the year. But Roddy beat. But that speed, not tolerance.
Roddy won.
Roddy did. Yeah,
Roddy he didn't shut up about it for the next 6 months.
Yeah,
he was very proud of that victory, Katz.
Well, we both broke the record of the place. Granted, it was like early in the year, but we like if Roddy wasn't there, I would have gotten a shirt and all the goods.
Wait,
you know,
he just kept clarifying that he won.
Yeah, he did win. I mean, we both completed the challenge in very well under time. Okay, but this is skill sets with eating. Okay, not so much with tolerance. So he can take that. I don't care. Okay.
Wow. Well, congrats to Roddy. Is there anything he's not good at? I actually once had a spicy eating challenge with Kriparian and Frodan at a Hearthstone tournament, and I crushed face.
Nice.
Krip thought he was tough. Like, all right, 2-0 Krip, done. All right, so that is the code on our Matcherino. Please type it in. Give us free money. It's awesome. Okay, so let's go through this week in StarCraft and then get into our wonderful topics for the show. Of course, this week in StarCraft, put together by the wonderful Alessander, is connected anywhere that you watch the Pylon Show, whether you're watching it on YouTube or you're watching it in podcast form or anything like that. We will have this document up. So anything that I talk about that you want to know more about, just check out the Google Doc. All right. Let's go ahead and jump down to page 3, upcoming events. We have, of course, the ESL Open Cups. They are going strong basically every single week. We have IM Katowice 2020, round of 76. I think they finished up the main qualifiers for those. The signups are going to close on January 27th, which is coming up in just 4 days. So if you want to play at I Am Katowice, make sure you check that out. The OSC Super Series, $25,000 for 2020 with 5 weekly cups, 3 midseason playoffs, and 1 championship. And the second No Gamer Left Behind charity tournament is coming up as well. But I guess we'll talk more about all these within the notes. All right, the ESL Open Cups. You can see that it is just nonstop, man. There are tournaments absolutely all over the place, but not too many people signed up yet. If you want to, go ahead and sign up in any region that you want, whether it's EU, KR, or US. It's, of course, cast by Wardy, Base Trade TV, Take TV, O Gaming, all that stuff. Then we have the I Am Katowice. A lot of players have already signed up for that. Really the biggest tournament of the year at this point. So definitely do check that out. You can see the players that have already won the server qualifiers. A ridiculously strong lineup right there, especially those NA players. Oh my God.
3 of my favorites.
3 of my favorite NA champions right there. Zest is truly an American hero. All right, we have OSC's $25,000 Super Series 2020, as previously mentioned. There's going to be all sorts of trial tournament series, $100 Masters Cups, $50 Community Opens, $50 Battle for the Americas, $50 Passion Craft, $35 Australian Opens. Check them all out over on sc2online.com. The second No Gamer Left Behind tournament. This is a charity tournament that begins on the 25th in just a couple days here. It's going to have Pig, Neuro, Livy B, Florencio, Era, Gosu PvP, Glazerbeam, and Kessnuts. And that is going to be a tournament where players have to use handicaps. You can see all sorts of the handicaps over there on the right-hand side. Looks like Neuro won it last time. Definitely check it out. It's for a good cause. All right. Where am I? Okay, this week in StarCraft. It looks like ESL Cup Korea. Solar defeated Estrella in the finals 3-2. With the next one playing 3 days from today. Not that many signups for the Korean Cup compared to some of these other ones. So, well, if you want to play some of these great players, go ahead and sign up. Then the ESL Cup EU. I saw that Hero Marine won his 2nd in a row. Nathanius is Terran too strong.
It is. It is. There's a great clip posted from, I think it was the last game of that final series, or Hearthstone accidentally got +1 air attack instead of warp gate. That was on top of SC. That's one of those. Could have been a really close match, I guess.
That is 3 out of 4 Terrans in the semis, if I see correctly.
Yeah, it's becoming quite Terran dominated in the foreign scene, from what I can understand.
That's
you know,
strange.
and the nerfs weed out the mediocre players, and we see
Oh.
true talent rise to the top.
You're spicy. I thought it was spicy week.
All right. Congrats to Hero Marine. 3 days until the next one. Then the NA Cup, Cure defeated Bly in the finals 3-1. Another couple of my NA favorite players. Let's see, where was our top finishing NA player? Oh, the round of 8. Massa, Jim Rising, and Puck. Very nice.
Yeah, Jim Rising took out Mana, by the way. This is like like half congratulations to Jim Rising and half of a bop in the head to Mana, you know, because it's like, come on.
Yeah. All right. Well, ESL NA Cup, next one in 3 days. We also have the 2020 BJ Destruction Match Season 1. It looks like the finals are going to be played at the actual studio, or, well, I guess they actually were last night. SOS Stats and True versus Cure, Patience, and Rogue. And yeah, it looks like the Stats, SOS, and True team won.
BJ
Kind of a weird team to look at. You got like
Destruction.
Yeah, the BJ Destruction League. It's
Not as good as the
I
ass
can't.
tournament.
I'm 5 years old.
I miss
the
TV StarCraft something, I forget. Star League. Ass.
oh yes, no. This is what we call it at Africa TV, the BJs. The broadcast jockeys is what that stands for. They don't use the term streamer in Korea. You're a broadcast jockey if you are a streamer. All right. Glad I could clarify that for everybody.
Yeah.
We also have the Chinese Team Championship 2020 preseason event. Solar took down Deer in the finals 4-2. Of course, Wardy and Take TV both streamed that. We have the OSC Championship Season 7, Cure 4-0 over Denver in the finals. Cast by Wardy once again, as is the usual. We have the Olimo League, which isn't cast by Wardy. This is, well, actually, sometimes it is, but
Is it though?
maybe cast by Maynard. I'm not sure. Anyways, we had Sue 3-0 over Zaun, who is really up and coming strongly lately. Congrats to them. If you want the best replay pack out there, subscribe to Oli Moly's stuff on patreon.com/OliMoly.
How long has Sound been around for? Because he is
several years.
Lately. Yeah, but he is up and coming lately. You're correct about that. Like it's
yeah. So he was like kind of up and coming, and then I actually believe he did his military service, if I'm not mistaken. So he disappeared, and now he's back.
Oh, that would be cool. That would be
timing. That is, you finish your military service, you start to peak, and then they're like, "Hey, StarCraft's around for 3 more years." It's like, "Oh shit!" All right.
Yeah, he would get a big boost from that, I think. Yeah,
no doubt. All right, the Kung Fu Cup 2019. Number 2, Zest defeated TY 3-0 in the finals. Of course, casted by Wardy. Check it out. We have the Wardy 2020, probably casted by Wardy. I don't know. And Clem defeats Harstom 3-1 in the finals. I feel like it's this week in StarCraft, like it's this week in Wardy, basically. The last 3 or 4 Pylon shows, I just read everything that Wardy is casting, and that's it. And there's nothing else going on because it's kind of the off season.
Okay, so here's my thoughts. Okay, on this segment, I think that's great because it makes people submit stuff and it promotes their content and all that stuff. But is it too long for viewers? The segment, I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's the big question, because sometimes we cut it and then I actually get a surprising amount of complaints.
So here's the solution, because I was actually thinking about this. What about a prompter like in the news where you just have this week in StarCraft constantly scrolling?
Do you one better? We get one of those guys that can talk really fast, and we just literally just have them bang it out, newscaster
No.
Yeah, Club defeats Harstom 3-1 in the Wardy 2020.
Well,
the Kung Fu Cup,
the news scrolling constantly.
Just boom, just get through it all in 15
I
seconds.
think that would be cool. And just highlight the big ones.
Too many people listen to this show. I do think saying what's going on out loud is an important component of it.
A lot of people don't actually watch the show. They listen to it in podcast form. So I think it's difficult to use a text-based way. And
I just want to say,
realistically,
awesome. We've got the problem of having so much going on in StarCraft that we're talking about how to say it fast enough to keep everybody happy. That's a good thing.
It's a good problem.
Amen.
Honestly, I think also this is probably the most important part of the show. As much as I personally like to just shoot the shit with my friends and talk about StarCraft and, troll people, this is where we're actually doing benefit, I think. It is very much kind of just saying what's going on in the world. But thank you for your feedback, cats. I'll file it with all the other guy in the chat feedback. All right. We got Legacy Weekly Japan. The number 202, Winter for Fun beats Vicervana 2-0 in the finals. I believe that's his second win in a row. If you live in Japan and speak Japanese, enter that tournament. The American Thunder League, Season 1. Huh?
Probe speaks Japanese.
Does he?
Yeah.
Well, you should move to Japan and play in the Japanese weeklies.
He should.
Did you ever think of that?
Probably not.
No, probably not.
What is he doing with his life?
I don't know.
Watch anime in Japanese without the subtitles. What else could you do?
You can kind of understand what's going on in anime anyways. All right, we have the American Thunder League Season 1. We're at the top 4 right now. Disc versus Special and Vindicta versus Future. Smell a little rivalry coming between those two. Check it out over on Thunderjunk77 on Twitch TV. We also have the Ryzen $300 open bracket tournament. Puck 4-2 over Starkiller in the finals. Check that out. That is hosted by Rails with a $300 prize pool.
What's pretty cool about this tournament, by the way, is that Special competed and didn't win.
Oh, yeah. Look at that. Estrella took him down.
Yeah.
How about that?
That is pretty cool. That's worth noting because that doesn't happen often, right? Special is one of those guys that can only lose to 5 people, you would think. So for Estrella to rise to his level.
Estrella's getting good, man. He's out here practicing right now. It's crazy.
Yeah, good on Puck as well, obviously winning. And whoever did this bracket, it's just I actually went through the show notes. Look at the lower bracket. Come on, Starkiller like good job getting to the finals, but really, like I'm not sure, you know, like
It was probably just a random bracket, I would imagine, right?
I don't know. You think so? I don't know. Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, I see a bunch of players that I actually know at the top: Special, Estrella, Puck,
Yeah.
Gerald. That's like those are probably the top 4 normally.
Yeah, exactly. And they are seeded, right? They don't play each other in the first round. It's just the other side of the bracket. Anyone could, you know, make it to the finals.
Well, if anyone knows anything about rigging brackets, Adrian, do you think that this bracket is rigged or?
Yes, Adrian. Is this bracket rigged?
As a professional bracket rigger in my past career, I think that this was either randomized or, I mean, if Rails is putting up the $300 to do the tournament, he can seed it however he wants to.
Yo, absolutely.
Old DreamHack stage show used to just be like, this is how I think players are good.
Yeah.
That was how DreamHack got it seeded.
This will give us the final that will get the most people to tune in.
Yeah.
I mean, that reasoning I'm okay with. But like but this tournament, it's a little bit strange to me, because it's like you're not going for the finals or the viewership or anything. You're just going for like one of the people that would never make it to a finals in this tournament, and this same is going to, no matter
excuse you, how many pizzas have you won?
That is a good point. I mean, StarKiller is a good player, just not nowhere as good as the other 4, right?
Well, congrats to StarKiller for his 2nd place and Puck for winning that tournament. And cheers to Rails for putting it on. All right, we also have In Depth. I actually did an episode on Estrella's PVZ because it is looking so strong. He went 2-3 against Solar and 1-2 against Rogue in some deep tournaments. So definitely check that out over on my YouTube, ArtosisTV on YouTube. We also have Passioncraft Sunday Showdown. This is on 26th of January, and it's going to be a weekly showdown on the EU server every Sunday at 6 CET in cooperation with the OSC. Check it out. They have a Discord. We have the OSC Super Series Battle of the Americas, and it replaces the Sentimiento Latino starting on the 25th. Open to NA and LATAM players as part of the new OSC Super Series. We have the Corporate Esports Association, and the signups, the registration is open. If you are part of a company and have some friends that you want to play some StarCraft 2 matches with, check it out at cea.gg. We also have the Shirshadi Open number 1. Number 2 is going to play today, I guess, and this is over on twitch.tv/Shirshadi. Not sure who won that first one, though. We have a Nation War, Peru versus Chile. Played over 2 days on the 25th and 26th coming up. The Spanish stream will be by Enki, and the Portuguese stream by Vincent In. The TL map contest. We're going to keep telling you about this. It's coming up. You need to look at it. You need to vote. The maps are important. It's something that we have really learned on the Pylon show more often recently as we talk about things that it impacts the ladder and how you play. It impacts the pro scene quite heavily. And according to Terran players, it impacts them and whether or not they can win very, very much. So, yeah, check it out over on teamliquid.net. The voting phase starts tomorrow. So, seriously, there's like a month of voting. Check it out. All right, just a move. Learning build orders. This is from ESChamp over at eschamp.com. And they talk to Max Yu of Terrancraft to discuss the concept of build order blocks and how someone can use it to make the process of learning build orders easier. I haven't seen this content, but build order blocks are very, very important if you're trying to get better at the game. So check it out over on ESChamp on Twitch and their website. We have ESChamp's Pubcraft. It is a holiday LAN. From the Holiday LAN 7 comes a new event. Okay. On the 26th, it's going to be at the Hive Esports 13 in Toronto, Canada. You definitely want to go down and show up. If you like StarCraft and you're near Toronto, definitely check out Pubcraft with ESChamp. Also, if you speak Spanish, episode 8 of La Espera podcast is out. You can find them over at laespera.com/podcast. And we have the La Espera 2vs2 tournament. And it's open to all tournaments from Latin America on Sunday, February 22nd, $50 prize pool. We have the 2020 Winterland on February 15th for the growing local scene in Atlantic Canada. It's going to be in Halifax. So you have to live kind of way out there. And it's going to be a BYOC, bring your own computer in the classroom. Okay. Check it out if you are way over there in the ocean. We have the Bad Pizza Iolo. Brazilian team, the Bad, is doing a tournament with Brazilian players where the winner gets a pizza. Wow, these pizza tournaments are really catching on. It's going to be casted in Portuguese. If you're from there, go check it out. Win yourself a pizza.
Cool art, cool logo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. This week in Brood War, we have the Titanis Del Ring Nation Wars. Chile takes USA.
That was good. That was your best Spanish yet, Dan, that I've ever heard, actually.
Really?
Yeah,
I thought I was doing pretty good overall. Yeah.
Oh,
thank you.
Oh.
Yeah. All right. Titanis Del Ring. Check this out. The finals are going to take place February 22nd. We also have the Brood War G's Weekly 53. Looks like Scan is back on his reign of terror to win all of the tournaments. Takes out Zella in the finals there.
Hey, wait, Dan. How is
Yes.
Chile B more represented than Chile A?
That happens sometimes.
I know that happens sometimes, but can you explain
Yeah.
the process? It's like, what is it? It's like monarchies almost, right? I feel like when I played Brood War, at least, like entering a national team wasn't even necessarily skill based. You had to break into the society of existing in the world of these people, right? I think Germany was really cool because Germany had a system where it was like, if you challenge and beat someone in the Germany team, then you're in the team type thing. Like it was kind of like what is those people called in the Dalthrakis, right?
Yes.
Dothraki way. Yeah, but all other teams are just like this, where and eventually you just have to be better than Chile A, and that's kind of sad, no?
You have to kind of be friends with the right people, I guess, on most of these teams, because it's like some guy is in charge and then he chooses a bunch of people. He's like, no, this person's better than that person. And we had that happen back in the USA team. Like there was a USA A team, and it was like this niche of players that really weren't that good. And then Jeff made USA B, and we were so much better than USA A. We actually like crushed
right, yeah.
It was truly hilarious.
Yeah.
But I guess that's what's probably happening with Chile B right there. So
Yeah.
congrats to Chile B. Chile A, you dropped the ball. All right. So yeah, we already talked about Brood War G's Weekly. And the Bombastic Star League Season 8, Group A and B are done. Bandy and TT1 coming out of Group A. No huge surprise there. Group B, Bonneth and Hawk. Again, no big surprise there. Even though Team Liquid somehow thought Goku would come out of that group. Looks like Group C going to be played this weekend, as well as Group D. So definitely check that out over on Zero's Twitch channel, casted by Rapid and Nyoken.
Cool.
All right, the Brood War Clan League, the BWCL. This thing is still going strong 49 seasons later. It looks like DM defeated Nas A 4-2, and IRKA defeated Bull A 5-1. Check it out, twitch.tv/Vincent4TV or /Evilbringer. STPL Season 2 continues forward. Going to week 12, Soul Gaming White and into Rick Tikka and some other teams took wins. Week 13 ends the round robin phase. And yes, check it out. This is over on Kix's channel, casted by Kix and Rapid. Then we have the Caster Muse Star League Season 2. The group phase is done, and it looks like Shine has already advanced into the round of 4. A lot of great players still left over playing in that. Looks like Snow, the only Protoss to make the round of 8. Let's check it out over on africatv.com. All right, the KCM Challenge Season 8. This is kind of the junior KCM team. It looks like so far the Zerg is doing a bit better, with Zealot being a big hero here. You can check that out over on Kim Chol Min's YouTube and Africa page. Then we have the Russian Pro League, The latter stage is going until the 31st of January. If you live in Russia or an ex-Russian state, you can go ahead and play in this, and there's a $300 prize pool. It'll all be on twitch.tv/GG_silver. Then we have Hazley's Nut Cup #1. I believe that they are literally giving away a giant bag of hazelnuts to the winner.
Those are expensive. I just want to clarify that might be worth more than a pizza, because hazelnuts.
Oh, definitely.
Ones,
yeah,
they're costly.
yeah.
All right. Well, it's good to know. And a lot of actually very strong players signed up there. Liquid Drones, Squall, Cadenzi, and Striker are all quite strong players. So it looks like that will be playing soon. I'm not sure exactly when, but definitely it's gonna be a bloody battle for those hazelnuts. All right, the Undermine Podcast, episode 37. We had the guy who runs this at Making Computer Do Things on the show. Well, kind of last week. It was a makeup episode since I was sick last week, but definitely check it out. Another episode is up over on his site. We also have Torch Up. This is something, again, we talked about on the last show with the AI bots in StarCraft 1, a tournament that's taking place through this coming weekend. And then we have the Afrika TV at Challenger Star League Season 1. It did finish up, and CKH, who is mostly known, I believe, as a fastest map player, ended up winning the regular tournament 2-0 over Bishop in the finals. Congrats to him.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And ASL Season 9 has just been announced. They do have some wild cards that are playing. Rain dropped out of the tournament. I believe he's having some wrist issues at the moment. And Sharp won the wild card for that. It's interesting that only one person went through wild card. That might mean that Flash is playing in ASL. I am unsure as to whether or not that's occurring. But if he does, I swear to God, I never learned. People say they quit StarCraft. They actually never do. It's not true. It's not true, because Flash like quit twice now. Jaedong, remember when Jaedong retired? Yeah. Next week he was playing on stream. Like, what are we doing here? Anyways, it's exciting that ASL has been announced, so look out for that coming up soon. The qualifiers are actually next weekend. All right, this week in Awesome, we have a list, of course, of all the StarCraft podcasts and talk shows with links to them. This one looks like it's got an I crossed out, so maybe, okay, we're going to skip that one. And that's it. Okay, this week in StarCraft is over.
Hell yeah.
All right. All right. God, there's a lot going on in StarCraft, man. It is crazy.
I just want to go back and clarify. Rails did randomize the bracket. He did not rig it. He randomized it. So.
Right. Yeah.
Sure. We believe you.
Well, I believe it. It's like you wouldn't want that. That wouldn't be your optimal bracket, anyways. You would seed everyone out probably a lot more. Okay.
Yeah, let's believe it.
Okay. So this week in StarCraft is over, and we can start talking about all the good, juicy stuff. Of course, guys, we don't need to stay on topic too much. Oh, real quick before we start, actually, we're trying to be professional here at the Pylon Show and announce shows like a week ahead of time. Doesn't always work out, because sometimes I don't even have guests until a day before, and Cobra's messaged me. He's like, well, we have a show. Like, come on, I need to get it ready. But this one has been in the works for a long time, and it is finally occurring. So let's go ahead and throw that up on screen. Next week, episode 79, we are going to have on the CEO of Shopify, to be lucky. And TLO is going to be joining me for that as well. That's going to be a fun episode. For people who recall, he offered Select a job just based on his merits as a StarCraft player, and then doubled the prize pool at the last Home Story Cup. He's also streamed some StarCraft and mentioned that he was a good StarCraft player before, I guess, he had to go and become a rich CEO of Shopify and do all sorts of other crazy stuff.
Yeah,
so that'll be fun.
To have learned a lot from StarCraft and apply that into, his vision for his now empire.
Yeah, and that's going to be a fun episode because of that. So I'm interested in having that chat. So that'll be good, guys. Check that out next week. So yeah, there you go. And now let's talk about all the stuff that we're going to talk about today. So guys, obviously you recently left Blizzard and are doing whatever it is that you're doing right now. You can share that or not, up to you. but you two were kind of really important. Adrian, you're kind of like, you were the entire esports scene, basically. If I'm not mistaken, you were #1 for StarCraft esports or StarCraft 2 esports for a very long time, right?
Yeah, I mean, for most of that time, it was really like it was me running it day to day, but it was Mike Morheim who called the shots in the end. Like there was like for a long time there, it was a very like clear, like sort of everyone in leadership that I worked with was involved in it, but I was running the day to day. So like Kim Fan, Amy Morheim, Mike Morheim, Chris Siggety, Tim. Like there was a period where there was like a crew of us sort of all running it together. But the day to day was me. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, like anyone actually involved in the scene knows you very well because of that. I mean, you're kind of the guy that we have talked to for years about everything. And then, of course, Tim, you were basically the leader of StarCraft 2 for 5 years, which encapsulates Legacy of the Void completely.
Well, to kind of go back to what Adrian said, I think the reality is it is very much a team effort. And so I was in a role where I was helping to shepherd the team for sure. But yeah, it takes a lot of people to make StarCraft happen, both on the esports side and the dev team side.
Yeah. Well, with you guys leaving, it feels like there's a gigantic hole in these areas. And obviously we've had, like, for instance, on your side, Adrian, the ESL Pro Tour has been announced. I guess that's a good place to start, would be that kind of esports side. And just kind of, can you guys talk a little bit about what this means for StarCraft to no longer really be in-house? We saw a lot of tweeting from various esports team members that they had to get moved around and everything. It feels like maybe Carrie's the only one left over there as far as StarCraft 2 esports goes. But yeah, what does this mean, this gigantic shift from the way that it's been done for years and years?
Adrian's going to have the most perspective on this, but I do want to jump in first and say, as much as it does predicate change, and you guys covered this on a previous Pylon episode, but it is such an amazing thing for StarCraft as a scene to have the security of a long-term esports commitment. So Adrian, from there, you should probably take it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot I can share on this. So when I left the team in October, this deal was already being worked on. And it was pretty clear that it was going to go through. Things take, especially things of this magnitude where you're working on 3 years and, you know, a big deal with an external group where they're taking ownership of something. But it was fairly certain. And I had been working with Sam Braithwaite, who's the lead on esports over there, and he was really committed to it. And so I felt like whether I was there or not, this was going to go through. And really the whole point of the deal with ESL and DreamHack was really to empower them to make the coolest StarCraft scene that they possibly could. So there was like, it was something where it was sort of a natural passing of the torch that was happening anyway. For those of you that don't know, in leadership over at ESL and DreamHack, like Sebastian Weishar and Mike Van Driel are both big StarCraft fans and have a lot of history with the scene, and also Warcraft 3 fans. And then on like the operational side, obviously, we all know Sean Apollo, but also Matt Weber. Heyoka, you might know him from on TL or other places. We've been working with for, I guess, 3 or 4 years on the DreamHack side to really make these. So it's kind of something where, while a lot of the pieces on the Blizzard side have changed, the pieces at ESL and DreamHack haven't changed at all. And it's just empowering those people to be able to take ownership and really make it work for, I mean, the events were already happening at their, I mean, it was WCS at DreamHack. It's this weird like double stacking of IPs, and now it's just simplified. It's a DreamHack. Or I mean, I guess it's still the ESL Pro Tour. So you just can't get rid of away from that stuff. I remember at one point we had like it was like the WCS IEM Katowice StarCraft 2 World Championship XI 2020 or something. You know, like you get these horrendous presented by Blizzard Entertainment, run by ESL. But yeah, so that's the case. But really, in handing that off and empowering people, it's something where we don't like. I didn't want to be in the way. I don't think Blizzard wants to be in the way, and it really is about empowering the two organizations, DreamHack and ESL, together to make something that's as cool as possible. So I think when you see people moving around and other announcements like that, it's really because people you already know and trust and have worked with in the past and have been shown to be awesome shepherds of StarCraft 2 are taking over. The other thing is, I know like it's hard. It was also announced on the same day, but DreamHack and ESL are also partnering with Blizzard on their Masters Tour Hearthstone events. And so I believe it's all being sort of rolled up into one
Warcraft as well.
Yeah, and Warcraft. So it's all being, instead of being managed like there's a StarCraft team at Blizzard, it's now being managed as like there's a team that's making sure that works out well. The like total relationship with ESL and DreamHack, as far as I understand it. Obviously, like I'm on the outside now, and some of the stuff was in the works when I was leaving. But it's there's been a little bit of restructuring, but it was mostly to make it work where we have this like much bigger relationship between three companies really now, and I think it'll provide a lot more flexibility, a lot more transparency. I think there'll be a lot of cool things that come out of it in the next year. At Blizzard, I don't want to say that it's not that our hands were tied, but as being a giant company that has $4 billion in revenue or something like that, you have a certain amount of risks and you have a certain amount of sort of operational overhead and things like that. And ESL and DreamHack are much faster companies. They're changing their dynamic. And so I think, even coming down to like I know the announcement came fairly late this year. But a lot of the reason why it came late in previous years was because it's like the way Blizzard's corporate structure works. And it's not a bad thing. It's just the way big companies work. But now that's set up for multiple years. It's set up to have, much more agile companies be working on it. So I think it's all cool changes and something, I was pushing for before I left. So I think it's really positive all in all.
If I may ask then, is that part of why you would have left? Or I don't know if that's a question that you...
Yeah, I mean, it's very personal. Like there's a ton of personal reasons why I left. Tim and I actually both had insane commutes. I was commuting 2 hours a day each way by train. Wow. Tim lives in Malibu, which you guys know LA geography is not close to Irvine at all. So there is a lot of personal reasons. But the other part was, I felt like that torch was being passed and that I didn't have to worry about it. And it was always something where, when you work at a job that long, your like sense of self gets tied up in the product and you really care and have a sense of ownership. But this felt really natural and good, and I'm really glad that it all went through and ended up working out.
Okay. Timing, I don't know if we're asking like hot questions here, but timing was close to the Blitzchung stuff, for example. Did that play a part at all for you?
So I worded my tweet very, very carefully about this. I had put in my notice a month before any of that stuff happened. I was like waiting for my next. I'm working as like a product manager at a.
What if another more or less hot question? These are my curiosities, I guess. Yeah. But like BlizzCon was a little bit of a letdown for a lot of people, right? On the esports side of things, and that's because of like how jammed it was. Like, did you have information on this before leaving to where you like decided you want to not part in it, or?
I'm going to
No,
jump in
no.
on that one because I actually deserve part of the blame for how that went down.
Alright.
I was really a fan of the experience of BlizzCon Esports for StarCraft 2 in the arena. And the years that we moved out of the arena, just that format where the audience can see each other, it's a little more vertical. So, just the sense of scale of the space, even if you're in the nosebleed seats in the arena, you're actually still closer to players than if you're in the back in the big hall that we were in. So I was really eager to get StarCraft back in the arena, and we had an opportunity to do that. But the trade-off was that we had to share and do this split format where we had the arena for a day and Overwatch had the arena for a day. And so that opportunity I was really pushing for. So, apologies that it didn't turn out as
Was this a decision of the StarCraft team then? To do this over a different area, or?
Yeah, I think we probably could have pushed to stay, in a dedicated area. But I don't know, Adrian, if you want to add any color to that. But I really, I'm the bad guy on that one. I made a bad call.
Yeah, I think it was at Blizzard. No decision gets like made by one person. I don't know. You've seen a little bit of this, Paolo, probably, but like, there's everything. The way decisions get made at Blizzard is like if everyone goes into a meeting and no one says no. I tried to be more like with like esports in a league and when people's careers and like basically their livelihoods on the line. I try to be a little bit more like break it down a little bit more than that, but that's the way it could be. So, but in the end, I was really hyped up about the opportunity to go back into the arena, and that's one of the things I feel bad about leaving when I did. I don't think I would have been able to solve all or maybe even most of the issues that happened there, and maybe it would have ended up exactly the same, but I would have liked to have like I think me and Tim are probably the two people most responsible for that decision getting made and how it was set up. And like, I felt bad that I wasn't there to at least share in the difficulty of it. The other thing is it's just doing something for the first time in esports is always really hard. We were working, or the team was working with the Overwatch League broadcast team. And there were some really cool things we were able to do because of that, but it was still
it was the same production team essentially, right?
Yeah, it was the same production team that did World Cup. It's most of the same production team that did Overwatch League, also the team that did World Cup the next day. And that's the way you want to do it. Like we had an experience in IEM Katowice the first year we did IEM Katowice, where when we swapped over to the main arena, we swapped over to a new production team, and that had a bunch of issues. And so there was a bunch of sort of past like history and examples that I was going off of. Yeah. But I think like if they do that same format again this year, I think you'll see market improvements, and you just can't know. Like if people go back to the first years that we did, if we had done a show like I did in 2013 or 2014, I don't know how many. I feel like people gloss over this, but 2014 was one of the worst esports tournaments I've ever been a part of.
People's fears also play into this, right? Like people are freaking out about like what's going to happen, and then they want to feel shorthanded, and they will notice everything and every part that we are getting shorthanded in and make a bigger deal out of it than it is.
Yeah, and I was there in person, and there was some of the matches went extremely long, which I think was the difficult. Yeah. The one thing that I would push for in that format is just to decrease the amount of time between games. Like that was the whole point of doing the 4-player desk setup on stage. And I think there was, it's again, doing anything first time in esports is really hard, but I think if you went into it again, sort of knowing how everything works, and you had the 4-player desk set up, you could do something very similar to like how GSL does it, or how some 4-player setups did it in the past, where you just go game to game to game. The point was to have sort of as little production as possible, because you were just always in game, and that's what we just want to watch StarCraft. Like that's.
I mean, I feel like for BlizzCon, I feel like that's the one event where you can actually tie things together and like have the type of segments and space out the games, or like maybe the solution would be to have like four players instead of 8, or right in the final. Was it 8 in the final day, in the one day?
It was 8 in one day. You would have to go down to 4 or change the format so it would go to 6. I don't know. It was a risk, and it didn't pan out as well as it could, but I think it could work out. And I think one of the cool things is the team this year with BlizzCon, they haven't announced anything related to it, but they did put in the announcement that there would be a BlizzCon this year.
Yeah,
and they're going to be able to take all the learnings from the previous year, plus have the ability to totally revamp the format. So hopefully we get a product that fits like perfectly in that space, or wherever it ends up being, and is really awesome and cool.
Shirtless Roddy mud fight.
Yeah. That's what it's gonna be. Versus Boxer.
Hell yeah.
There's something that is kind of weird about this shift from Blizzard to ESL and DreamHack, because if you look back to the beginning of StarCraft 2, right, it was basically like GSL, MLG, DreamHack, and ESL/IEM were kind of like how it started, and like started to grow. Those were like kind of the tournaments back then, and then MLG dropped out like kind of quickly, but then Blizzard started taking over StarCraft 2 Esports as it was exploding in like 2012, and then kind of like, which was I think a very like questionable the way that it was done at the beginning. Like it was fun, it was exciting and all that, and then obviously we had this big time period of about 8-ish years of Blizzard esports going on, 7 or 8 years, and now it's kind of like going back to what it was, which is GSL will still be around, and then we'll have ESL and DreamHack doing a bunch of stuff. So like, was this whole StarCraft esports adventure by Blizzard, like, what was it successful? How do we look at this correctly in this light?
Yeah, I think so. That's a really good question. And I think we can relitigate the history a ton, but from my perspective, so I wasn't at Blizzard in 2012 when 2012 happened, and that was kind of the crazy year. That was when WCS and BWC were like a totally separate system than the rest of the community. It was basically a ton of tournaments stacked on top of all the other tournaments, with all these national qualifiers and regional qualifiers and leading up. And remember, like MLG Anaheim had like 2 tournaments at it in 2012, and it was this crazy thing. And everyone was like, okay, let's not do that. Let's not stack everything on top of each other. And then 2013, I actually think a lot of it may have looked like Blizzard was pushing sort of people out, but I think especially if you look at like the partnership, originally the first season of WCS America was a partnership with MLG, and then like I'm just gonna say it because this is forever ago, MLG didn't want to do it anymore, and it wasn't because we weren't letting them do MLG Anaheims or do other stuff like that. There was, it was Blizzard giving money to MLG, and they didn't see it as profitable. And then that's when I was brought in to run WCS America Season 2, basically because there was no production partner planned for WCS America Season 2. And then we worked with NASL, and then NASL went bankrupt very publicly in March of the next year. And we again had to pick up the second half of that season we partnered with like Red Bull, and ESL America had just opened. And then the rest of the 2013 to 2015 WCS system was a partnership between ESL and Blizzard. But going back to sort of what I was talking about earlier, it was this weird split partnership, right? Where WCS, the World Championship Series, wasn't inherently it was inherently a StarCraft product, but it wasn't an ESL product, and it wasn't a Blizzard product. And so you didn't have sort of like an owner or really a champion or a central force. Like everything was published on the ESL website, but then we had to mirror everything onto the Blizzard website. And it was this, like, I think that's where one of the strongest lessons I've learned in esports is you need like central vision holders that understand what the product are and are trying to put it together. And like having this like co-ownership doesn't work very well when it comes to esports. And so that's where in 2016 that's when I became like full on product manager, and where I really pushed for us to consolidate everything. And even if it cost more or was more difficult or there was more responsibility placed on us, that we would sort of take over, start running qualifiers, start doing all the communications around things. And like, again, that stuff was sort of a mess the first times we started doing it, but I think we got really good at it by 2018 and 2019. But that was because it was, like the buck stopped with me on sort of all this, how everything run. It was like, it was all came up to me. I was managing everything down. I could manage everything down to the nitty gritty. I tried not to. And then this is handing that over to ESL and saying, hey, you guys do the same job. I think ESL has a lot more levers. ESL and DreamHack both have a lot more levers to pull in terms of monetization. Like these events or ad events that they run, that they control, that they can loop in their sponsors with, that they can use to grow their events, sell hotel room blocks, like do all this stuff. So I think that I think that's the main difference between sort of the way 2013 to 2015 maybe doesn't feel great in people's minds, is sort of a little bit of
no direction, right? Almost, right?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, what we made was cool. Like the WCS Premier League was cool. The 2015 Legacy of the Void launch event is one of my favorite events we ever did. But there was just having that split, just it adds friction to how stuff gets done. And whenever there's friction in how stuff gets done, it makes people not want to do stuff, and it makes it harder to do stuff. And like it doesn't work. And so that's why I think, 2013 to 2020 is a big difference in how the relationship is structured, giving ESL and DreamHack full branding rights to have at their events. They run the show really in the end.
Yeah, that's a great question then, I think, and thank you, Adrian, for that too. I think that at the start though, like things arose organically more so than Blizzard providing MLG with like the funds to run MLGs, right?
Not MLGs. Sorry, I mean when Blizzard starting. So in 2013, WCS was created, or WCS got re-released in April of that year as WCS America and WCS Europe, and that was Blizzard sort of trying to
monetize,
pool their resources really with the community organizers out there, and slightly like rationalize the schedule of things. But all of these independent events were still going on, so it was like, I think it was part of the reason why those products didn't work, is you would have like 2 weeks of the round of 32, like half in America, half in Europe on different time zones. And then it would go dark for a month, and then you get a round of 8, and then it go dark for a month, and then you get a final. And like, there was a ton of like,
there was no consistency to be found. It was very unorganized, right? Like, so shit just happened. It's like, oh, this sounds cool, right? No real direction. And then eventually they consolidate. And the Blizzard team starts being better at what it does. But I'm with Dan that I think that StarCraft kind of arose organically, right, in this tournament circuits, and now it's going back to that only with the support of Blizzard now. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it does feel kind of like that. And I've always kind of had a little bit of a feeling that StarCraft 2 has been a learning ground for Blizzard as far as esports, because the esports scene really grew hugely kind of by itself. Like obviously Blizzard's always put some money towards it, but it got like really big. And then I felt like Blizzard tried a lot of things, made some mistakes, did some good things, and kind of like, I don't know, I feel like StarCraft 2 esports has been the guinea pig in a lot of ways to figure out what's going on.
Like we were first, like, as in terms of developers getting really involved in the esports. Like there's the pre 2010 era, sort of, when Twitch didn't exist and developers didn't try to get super involved in their esports. Like I'm sure the esports historians will call me out and tell me about how Quake or something.
Anyone who brings up Quake,
yeah.
my God.
But I really think that it's sort of a start of an esports era.
Yes.
and really Riot pioneered the like heavily involved developer. I feel like when they released their like LCS seasons in 2012 or 2013, I think it's 2012. And so Riot also has some of this esports pioneer thing, but StarCraft really does. And that even continued, like, I think something that Tim and I both worked on heavily was the war chest. And it's something where I know that not a like crowdfunding in esports at that point was not a new thing, but Blizzard, the sort of connective tissue and how to do it was not built up. And Tim actually was a huge force on making war chests happen. And now it's something like WoW does a crowdfunding thing now. Hearthstone did some last year, I know. And like it's something where that was always something I was really proud of, where we tried to figure things out first.
Because you kind of have to pave the way in an environment that's not super dynamic, like maybe Riot is compared to Blizzard, or ESL certainly is compared to Blizzard, right? So you have to kind of see how to connect that and make it a thing that happens.
Yeah, it's also just easier with, like, I think with some experimentation and other things like that, it can be easier in a 1v1 game. And doing all sorts of stuff. I don't know. It's cool.
Yeah, credit where credit's due. I think Jason Huck, who was the campaign lead for Legacy of the Void, came up with the original idea, and we eventually worked with the esports team and with a bunch of other groups around Blizzard to make it happen. Yeah. But one thing, just kind of from the dev team perspective, looking at all the iterations of StarCraft 2 esports, there definitely was a process of learning over time. And, each year at the end of the year, we would get together with the esports team and look back and figure out what we were going to do for the next year. And we were always trying to address specific problems. And I think, to Adrian's credit, by the end, we had gotten to a point where there was good format consistency, where we were seeing great viewership growth. And I do think there were a lot of qualitative improvements that happened with Adrian's team, continuing to try to level up StarCraft 2 esports. As things go back to third-party operators, hopefully we get the best of both worlds. Like hopefully a lot of those quality improvements are retained, but we'll have to see. I mean, every year we found new mistakes to make. I'm sure there'll be opportunities to keep improving. So,
well, that's definitely something that I think the Blizzard's involvement did well for the StarCraft scene, even though it's like kind of going back to who had it before. Now there's more of a unity of vision, where it's like before the tournaments, like back in, people remember 2010, 11, 12 is kind of like some glory years or something, but there was no actual uniting vision at all. It's like, yeah, that guy won IEM, and then this guy won DreamHack.
12 was cool. 2012 was cool. That's the
it was definitely a cool one, but
had their own
cool. I'm just saying, like, now that everything is kind of going back to them, there's like an actual story being told, I guess, which is a really nice change from how it was the Wild West. Because I know, like, for instance, I think Counter-Strike has an issue with that right now, where it's still in that StarCraft mode that we had back in 2011 and whatnot.
Yeah,
where,
ESL is one of the ones that try to consolidate.
But it's very difficult to do, right? Like you can't force the teams to do anything, and people win stuff all over the place, and I think that can make it a bit more confusing.
Yeah, what they need to do is consolidate HLTV and ESL. ESL needs to buy HLTV, and then they're good. Anyway,
that's a very fun conversation
It's a
to
hot
have
take.
about
It's a hot take.
where that's a whole giant mess in the entire industry right now between developers trying to run their own stuff versus production companies trying to get stuff to run.
Yeah.
Stuff.
Do you guys have any other questions about the esports side before we jump into some development stuff?
Esports are cool.
Esports
I had
are
something,
cool.
but I just brain fart.
I like esports. That's all right. We can always jump around. Of course, it's the new branding. So speaking about the development aspect of this, right? Because you were just talking about the war chest.
I had a comment actually. I had a comment quick on esports, just to give perspective to people watching us of to how little of a head the thing had. In the first few community summits, the feedback that we would give on the esports side, on the things on the in the convention itself, was usually to like David Kim's team. So it was like balance / esports, basically, which is just and David Kim. I no comment. That's good.
I remember the very first StarCraft 2 summit, like, was during a DreamHack that like everyone was at. So there was like just a few people at the actual summit, and we were just like, what is going on here? Anyways, about the development aspect of StarCraft 2, right? Like, obviously we were just talking about the war chest, and that's been fantastic. There's been like, it feels like the development ramped up for a long time in StarCraft 2 until maybe recently. I'm not 100% sure, but obviously there was, all the co-op commander stuff happening, the war chest. We've had a lot of great skins and all that, the announcer packs, minus the Roddy one. A lot of great stuff coming out. But what is, how, I mean, we have had so many people leave Blizzard, get fired from Blizzard and all that. What is the development looking like at this point?
Well, the first thing I'll say, and obviously now that I'm on the outside, I think like everybody, I'm not as up to speed with what the forward plans will be, but there is definitely still a team of great people working on StarCraft 2, many of whom I suspect are watching this stream right now. I think just looking back historically, StarCraft came from this world of traditional box products where everybody worked for a bunch of years towards a common goal. They shipped the thing, and then they kind of put their heads down and work towards the next thing that's going to be years out. And the team had to go through a transition to change process and approach and mindset to figure out how to adapt to operating StarCraft 2 as a service. And that was a really big shift. That happened after Legacy of the Void, and Blizzard was really great, Mike in particular, about supporting the team and having the opportunity to do that, and also giving us the space to figure out how do you approach that? Like, what is less than a full expansion for StarCraft 2? What does it look like if we're trying to deliver some piece of new content or some feature on a more regular basis than we did before? So, as the team figured that out, and certainly, things changed over time. War chest, we talked about, was one of the ideas that came up that kind of adapted the approach. Anyhow, it got to a point where we understood what types of content were being received well, sort of what modes of the game were seeing the most players. And that enabled us to shift our focus and try to service the community as best we could. It's probably worth saying as well that I think there really was a shift in team mindset, really great learning experience for me, and hopefully the rest of the team feels that way. But to go back to your core question, there definitely are still bunch of dedicated people. Ryan Shooter is a big part of setting the vision moving forward. Kevin Dong, those guys are going to continue to shepherd the product. And I actually don't know what the future plans are, but I'm as excited as everybody else to see what happens for the 10th anniversary of StarCraft 2 that's coming up.
Yeah. God, that is an old game at this point. Wow.
So on that question, I want to ask him, like, when you, because I agree, and this was a complaint I think that the StarCraft community had after the game shipped, right? And we're expecting Heart of the Storm and we're expecting Legacy of the Void, but there's no apparent intent from the StarCraft team to keep up with the times at that point, right? Like when the game first ships, and then you have much more responsive games like League of Legends that are actively like doing the shit that their fan base asks, or adapting in ways that their fan base likes. And us looking from the outside at a game like that, we're wondering why that's not happening, right? And this has all to do with the processes of like Blizzard and how slow it is. But at some point, I feel like it makes a realization, and it's around the time that you come in, where you brought in to like, was it your understanding coming into the team that the team wanted a change? Were you replacing someone, or were you just hired and kind of like were told, okay, do your thing? Because change was more apparent in your mandate as game director, right?
Cool question. I appreciate it. The point at which I came into Blizzard was a point in time where Team One, which was the original RTS team at Blizzard, was kind of splitting into two parallel development tracks. And one of those tracks was focused on Heroes of the Storm. One of those tracks was focused on Star 2. And it's a pretty cool opportunity. I certainly had never had an opportunity like this to come in where a product had already launched, was already successful, and just so happens was already one of my favorite games to play, and have a chance to come in and help steer the future of that product. And certainly Chris Siggety, Dustin Browder, those guys were hugely instrumental in setting the StarCraft 2 team up for success, as focus, was also being allocated to Heroes. So I had worked on a Command and Conquer product at EA that sadly didn't go to term, didn't get fully launched. But that was sort of my first exposure to this idea of operating as a service and getting out of that box product mentality. So it was a good chance for me to take some of those concepts and try to share them with the team. But to be fair, the team was already thinking about things like co-op that really lend themselves to continuing content. And in a sense, StarCraft had always operated as a service when it came to seasons and new map pools. So there was just a really good synergy between ideas that I was bringing in, ideas that the team already had.
Yeah. I mean, that makes perfect sense, right? Because the team has been like the StarCraft team obviously watches shows like this or reads Reddit or are gamers themselves and like StarCraft in itself. But do you feel like you coming in then made it so that they could express themselves through you, or that you could put a little bit more of a vision to things? How did you manage to consolidate a team that wasn't moving forward towards these things, even if they had the idea? Because I'm sure they had the ideas, right? Everyone has cool ideas.
Yeah, one of the cool things about this job of being a team lead, whatever you call it, at Blizzard it was called production director, but is the opportunity to try to help get everybody aligned around future vision for a product. And when I say everybody, it's the dev team, it's the support teams like Adrian's team, or customer support or QA or legal. Like there's all these support teams around a dev team, and then it's also up the chain to the Team One management and to Blizzard management. And it takes a lot to get everybody aligned around a vision. And I really felt like it would be valuable if StarCraft 2 had more regular content releases. And the hypothesis we wanted to test was, what does that do to engagement? Which means, what does that do to maintaining a steady state of players in the game if instead of every 2 years we release something, there's a more regular heartbeat of content? And it was a hypothesis, like, we don't know what the outcome's going to be, but the hope was that by having more regular releases, that would do good things for the game. And in hindsight, I think the player base for StarCraft 2, and we've talked a little bit about this in other formats, but the StarCraft 2 player base is just incredibly steady. And we really don't see the kind of variability or drop off that some other kind of games see. Certainly in my experience developing games, I've never seen a player base that's as stable as StarCraft 2. But of course, we always want to do things to stimulate that and see growth. And as you do new things, people come in and check it out and they go away. So it sort of blips and goes back down. But definitely the hope with doing more content was to see more engagement with players. And it was very rewarding to see that happen.
Yeah, I think something really interesting here that's like to give some insight on the thought process within Blizzard is that really when it comes down to it, like on the esports side, things cost dollars. On the dev side, things cost dollars. And you really want to keep the goal of those dollars is to keep people engaged with the game. And ideally, so they'll either buy a future version of the game or other products from the company, or they'll have microtransactions directly in the game. So I think that transition to having like things directly in the game you can purchase is huge, but it's also one of the biggest challenges on my side with esports is demonstrating that it's actually really, really hard when you look at the sort of data we have to prove that esports does that and does it in a cost-effective way or more cost-effective way of just spending money on more developers to build features or release content or other things like that. Because there's a virtuous cycle on the development side. Tim, develops the tech so that we can, or Tim and the team develop tech so that casters can, or so we can have new voice packs. They sell the voice packs. That causes people to be more engaged with the game. So they come back and they play more, which means it's more likely to buy a future one. But on the esports side, I can sort of say, hey, there's all these people watching. They're like, oh, cool. What kind of people are watching? I'm like, oh, they're really hardcore engaged users. And then the hard question comes, and are just the hardcore engaged users who are engaged by the game because the game's really good watching, or is it because there's something inherent about your esport that's really good that's causing them to watch? And so that's something.
But
yeah, it really is both, and I think everyone understands that intuitively. But in the esports industry overall, it's a question where that thesis hasn't been accepted. It is accepted by a lot of people in leadership, but at Blizzard, but you can't, because you can't quantify it. You can't put it on. You can't go to the CFO with it. You can't go to the finance department and be like, "This is
how much we're making.
This is how much we're making," or even just this amount. It's this amount gets us this much retention of users or whatever, which then leads to us getting this,
or loyalty, or all sorts of obscure concepts that have a worth, but it's obscure as fuck.
And so I think that's the challenge that everyone working in esports nowadays is dealing with. And companies like Epic Games that are just printing money, it's fine if they spend 1% of their revenue, which is a huge amount of money to do something. But on when you're at a company with a lot of priorities like Blizzard, or when you're working on smaller products, it becomes difficult. And I think what was great about Tim and the team was sort of just like building this sort of cohesive system where, like, MTX in the game doesn't exist without esports, because it's the casters that we're turning into voice packs, and sort of creating at least a cohesive feel that esports was a part of the experience of the game, and that esports was valuable, releasing in-game tournaments, other things like that. So I think that's one of the really cool things that StarCraft did in the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, that's super crazy metrics and like marketing and how that translates into anything, right? And esports is certainly like one of those things that's just so obscure, I guess. But it is apparent with companies like Riot, right? Like that League arises by the hand of esports and by the hand of Twitch, or like companies like Razer, right, that are known for products, because I think initially like anyone would associate Razer with players, by players, from players, whatever. Roddy was on one of the boxes, like I knew Roddy from a Razer box before I knew about Rowdy. So
I guess the question is, what if Riot had gone the Valve route, right? What if Riot had decided to spend no money on esports, let third parties run it, and they had decided, let's spend $0 on esports? Would they have made the exact same amount of money and just not have spent as much? Or would they have,
I think Valve still recognizes the importance of esports on their ecosystem, though, right? Like they'll profit off of it.
They spend on features and they spend on other stuff to make the esports work. So it's not that Valve doesn't put any resources in. But if they had been more hands off, who knows?
Yeah, for sure.
I think about a lot, actually, the different ways that esports can be done. And I always, in my opinion, the publishers or game publishers coming in and doing a lot of marketing budget spending on esports, I think has actually really screwed up the industry in a lot of ways, because we get all these stupid things like the $5 million cell phone game world championship garbage tournament, that makes it's like, well, who cares about this little StarCraft thing with its reasonable prize pool, because these guys are like on a fucking cell phone, e-gaming. And then, that versus, I feel like that's one far end of it. And then the other end, which has always felt to me to be more sustainable, would be like the way that a lot of people do Counter-Strike tournaments, where it's like, I'm not like, is Valve funding that? I don't think so. I think it's just like, this is my esports business model. I can make money because people want to watch this game.
Yeah. I actually see a lot of comments from time to time when people are talking about StarCraft 2 esports that sometimes criticize Blizzard for propping up the esport. And I think the reality is, as far as I understand esports, and Adrian, you can jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, or any of our esports legends here on the stream, but the reality of most big esports, if you look down that top 10 list, is that they are supported by the publishers of those games. And, for reasons that Adrian talked about, there are benefits to them doing that. There certainly are scenes, and I didn't realize that about CSGO, but if that's true, I think, they're fighting game tournaments. They're definitely very grassroots. So they're examples of completely self-sustaining scenes. But it actually feels healthy to me that publishers do invest in the esports scene around their products, and maybe there's some sensitivity to picking the right product, to your point, Dan. But I always thought that it was a wonderful thing about Blizzard that Blizzard was trying to create quality in the esports scene, just like they were trying to create quality in the product.
To go back to Artosis's thought earlier, though, I feel like Blizzard took notice of esports and tried to grab it by its reins at some point where it was already like an ongoing thing, and a lot of the thoughts or ideas around that time, like 2010 and on, was that Blizzard lost so much control to Kespa, and the idea was that the environment is set up to potentially blow up, and so they want to exercise control, right? Like that's the not so optimistic way of looking at the situation as it arose, I guess.
Yeah, Kespa is its own deep conversation, I guess. But to touch on some of the things that Adrian talked about as he was kind of recapping the history of StarCraft 2 esports, when there isn't central control, there are all kinds of issues with like even coordinating when tournaments happen, standards of fairness. Like there's just so much that having some central coordination does help. So totally, you can take a more dim view of central coordination, but I think there are a lot of positives there too.
Oh, for sure.
Actually, to kind of tie those two together, I wonder if on the development side, did you guys ever consider trying to, because I mean, you developed like a lot of things that got sold, and I'm sure must have helped StarCraft 2, and like the voice packs, the skins, the co-op commanders and all that. But like, for instance, we've all heard about the crazy numbers where like Riot puts out a new skin for a champion, or it puts out a new champion, and then suddenly they make so much money that it's like, yep, look at that. It was on TV for one day and we made millions of dollars. Was there ever like consideration to do that in development for StarCraft 2 to try to make it a more microtransaction based thing, like a lot of these games that have become so rich and popular?
The team was really circumspect, thinking about how to approach micro content for StarCraft 2. And I think, Blizzard tries to have really player-friendly values around the content that they deliver. And I think even StarCraft 2 team particularly wanted to be sensitive both to making content that got players excited, but also to making that content available in a way that felt economical and fair and just felt good to players. As far as brainstorming types of content, though, a lot of effort went towards trying to figure out what would players like, and that always has to be balanced with what does it take for us to produce that, and in terms of effort and new technology, et cetera. But I think if there had been opportunities to do types of content that generated millions of dollars instantly, we certainly would have been all for that. But we experimented with a lot of ideas.
I think with the StarCraft 2 paradigm, like where you have you play as a race with an army that has 10 15 unique buildings, 15 unique units, stuff, it makes it really hard to do that, because you either have to cut the, like, one of the problems with microtransactions, if you make stuff too cheap, people don't value it, and also you just get eaten alive by transaction fees. Like if you're charging $250 for something, like it's actually better to do like a bundle like War Chest, where you're doing one transaction and you're only like paying the credit card processing fee or whatever one time, and like having less overhead is good in this stuff. And my hot take on this, and we'll probably get into other RTS stuff later, is that I think you kind of need to redesign the RTS genre with monetization in mind if you want to be one of those giant mega titles, or you want to have the ability to have in League of Legends and other MOBAs. I mean, League of Legends in particular, they sell champions, and you would have to fully restructure if you wanted to sell units or access to units in a way that felt good in an RTS. You'd have to totally restructure the way tech trees, unit selection, the whole shebang works.
And probably be free to play to start off, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think free to play to start off is like the beginning of like it's like has to be the foundation of it. But then if you want to charge for content, not just like cosmetics, then you also have to redesign a lot of stuff.
I think that's a good observation. And definitely, like, the team struggled as we planned around taking StarCraft to free to play to think about how to best adapt the game to free to play as a business model, because it's super important that StarCraft 2 still be able to sustain itself. Like, it's super important that there's a reason to keep developing StarCraft 2. At the same time, it's possible to get too greedy and go loot box crazy, or other things like that. So that was challenging. And I think Adrian's comment is right, that a game that's designed from the outset to be free to play has some benefits where we had to adapt for something that had never really contemplated that business model.
Yeah, and that's what my hope for RTS is that people haven't done a proper economic model that works in the in the free to play era for an RTS yet, or for a good one anyway.
Yeah, right? At least from my perspective, it's a good and a bad thing for StarCraft 2, in that it kind of came out at this turning point, I think, in the entire gaming industry, where the largest, most successful products are these free to play with really fast content cycles. Like Fortnite is just the perfect example of, like, this game just constantly keeps putting out stuff that keeps people engaged. And as Tim was talking about earlier, StarCraft 2 is originally launched with like that box mindset, right? Well, you go buy the game and then you have the game, and that's pretty much it. There's some patches, right? Seasons, I guess, start for StarCraft specifically, but making that change, because the development of that, even it came out in 2010, but things weren't even close to where they are now. A few years back, when they would have started on all of it and built the engine and whatnot. So I find that to be probably the most interesting thing, is how do you actually make a modern RTS that works with how the gaming industry is, if you want to kind of capitalize on that social hype that those other games like League and Fortnite push out, because there's constantly things coming out, and because their team base, especially, so much that people are you know, the advertising is baked in. Everyone just you log on. Oh, my friends have this or that or that. You know, and that's at least for me. I like looking at StarCraft. It seems like it would be one of the biggest challenges without doing what Adrian said, and I completely agree with you that finding a way to have like a way that you can tool your army in a way that can incorporate microtransactions. That's man, I love hearing this discussion. I love talking about this stuff.
Yeah, and you pose a lot of good questions towards how do you adapt RTS, you know, to the current business environment, current player expectations. Like, how do we carry the genre forward into the future, which is a fascinating subject. And we learned a lot taking StarCraft 2 free to play. And even though we didn't have the benefit of having started with free to play in mind, stuff like commanders, you know, unit skins, but really war chest style army skins, you know, every other piece of content that we produced for StarCraft 2, we got a chance to see how did players react to that content and how does that content type perform. And you know, it's worth noting because there's sort of a subtext to all of this that you know, that there's an opportunity to do better. I definitely think there's an opportunity to do better, but even the things that we did for StarCraft 2 really were successful. Like commanders are doing great, voice packs are doing great, war chest is doing great. So I think there's sort of a template there to start thinking about that question of how we carry RTS into the future, but definitely more opportunities to do better.
Since we're on the subject, I would love to talk about the future of RTS because I don't know. Let me quickly give my kind of vision of what the RTS industry is right now, and then hear what you guys think. But
how many times? Wait, let's make bets on how many times Artosis says hard right now. He will probably say hard. I'm gonna go with 5 times. He'll say hard in this one.
Well, now I'm not going to say it at all. So, I mean, okay. So first off, my first thing is obviously StarCraft 1 and 2 are the best 2 RTS games of all time. I think like you have to find a Warcraft 3 specific fan to disagree with that, or someone that's an idiot. And that's like the only ways. And but right now I look at it, and Tim, you left Blizzard, and Dustin Browder isn't at Blizzard. So I look at that and I'm like, there's not going to be a StarCraft 3. Who's left to make a new RTS from scratch or whatever? It feels like it's like gone. And then I look at the rest of the industry making RTS games, and most companies don't really know what the hell they're doing. Like every now and then we get some that have some potential and some promise, but then you get games where it's like, oh, this is just, who made this, where you can't control anything, or there's 9,000 upgrades. Like, does anyone want 9,000 upgrades? And I don't know. It feels like so few people can actually make a good RTS. Maybe StarCraft has scared everyone away from trying to make an RTS that can actually be played competitively, because StarCraft 1 and 2 nailed it so damn hard. And one other small thing that I'll just throw in on the side here. I hate heroes in RTS. Like, seriously, stop making hero-based RTS games. What the hell are you doing?
Make them. Put heroes.
Oh, you're crazy cats. My God, listen to this guy that plays fucking card games and Dota on his stream all the time.
I play all kinds of games. Yeah.
I think one of the most revealing things here is that there was some like research that we did at Blizzard about StarCraft fans. We worked with this company called Fanalytics that like did a full survey of all StarCraft fans out there, and like what they talk about and what they do and what's there. And 2/3 of people who say that they are StarCraft fans are brand fans.
Oh,
they're 2/3 of people who say like I think this is one of the craziest things about working at Blizzard. You can post a photo to the StarCraft Twitter of Kerrigan and Raynor holding hands, and you'll get 1,000 likes. You get 2,000 likes. There's tons of there's a huge value to the StarCraft IP, like as something like that. So I think that's part of the reason why StarCraft 1 and StarCraft 2 have been so sticky, is that people just love freaking Protoss Zerg and Terran and like all the family Star Wars light drama that goes with it. So that's one part of it. So I don't want to hate on heroes and hero-based things and story mode and stuff like that. I love all that stuff. But then the other 1/3 of the fan base is like multiplayer. I love multiplayer. This is the best part. And so I think there's an opportunity to build something from the ground up for that audience and build that like ultimate multiplayer product. I don't know, Tim.
Yeah, so you started in a really good place, which is just thinking about the audience. And it is so fascinating how StarCraft is perceived versus the reality of the audience composition. And I'll share that, periodically we would go out and do press for StarCraft 2. And so these professional journalists would come in to play the latest build and check out a new feature. And it was amazing to me how consistently journalists would enter the room and they would just start off by saying, look, I'm not a real StarCraft player because I only play campaign. And the reality is most StarCraft players are campaign players. Now, to be fair, the players that stick around the longest are the multiplayer players. So they matter a ton, and they're very vocal. Like the community that is talking about StarCraft 2.
Artosis is like the living.
I promise I will finish the campaign one day.
There you go.
I was forced to at some point.
And
It's really
and
good, by the way.
with Void, there was this new audience that emerged that kind of had more Venn diagram overlap with both groups, which was the co-op audience. And that audience became huge. Like that mode is incredibly popular. So building any new RTS, you got to think about those different audiences because they really are different. And as Dan was talking about hero-based RTS, I was thinking in the back of my mind, well, our co-op mode is pretty much hero-based. So Dan, probably not the biggest co-op player, but that's okay.
I promise I will play a game of co-op someday.
But yeah, no, I mean, like we love all our players. So it's awesome that these different groups have found something that they love about StarCraft 2. So to Adrian's point, like there could be a new RTS that just tries to hone in on one of those audiences. From a pure business perspective, knowing what I said earlier, that the biggest audience is actually a campaign audience, they're a super important audience. So the win, hopefully you can find something that appeals to all of those people. Co-op has had a pretty good success, but there are a lot of people who need competitive, like pure competitive. And competitive arguably is the thing that kept StarCraft relevant all of these years. So I don't know, it's a good design exploration. Somebody's going to have to think about that.
An anecdote here, I guess, when I was going to cast WCS North America with Nathaniel, my Uber there one day was like, oh, where are you going? Oh, I'm going to cast this event. It's a StarCraft event. He's like, oh, StarCraft 2? I'm like, yeah, you play? He's like, yeah, huge fan, right? I'm like, oh, like cats, No, but I was like, oh, but you don't know what event I'm talking about, basically, right? Like the WCS Challenger. He had no clue, right? And then he's like, no, I only play co-op. And I was like, oh, that's okay, that's cool. And then we started talking about co-op, and he started telling me about co-op, and I was like, why don't you play multiplayer, right? Like, why don't you play the ladder? And he was, everyone there is a fucking asshole.
I can't disagree with that.
And then, Artosis' stream flashed before my eyes, for it was great.
Yeah. I mean, I just to chime in one more time on this subject, I think a lot of this is growing pains to an extent, and probably the most precious thing about StarCraft is how serious the competitive side is, and probably how much on the developer side they go in with that as well for the competitive side. I think there's a lot of stuff, at least like based on conversations that we've had in the past and whatnot, where it's like the potential for some of those things that the casual players would enjoy more, whether they be in multiplayer or not, is certainly interesting. But I do find that fascinating because just as other examples, other really popular titles, they force so much onto their competitive scene. They do not care what the pros' opinions on metas are. They do not care if there's a major tournament that is about to start. And for all that you can say about how big XYZ game is, it's one of those things when you look at those pro scenes, how much bigger they are, the dissatisfaction with a lot of that type of stuff is part of what keeps the game moving, because that type of mass thing and forcing it onto everybody as often as possible is one of the reasons why those games can be bigger, which is one of the things that I really liked about co-op, because we got so much stuff, and it didn't matter because no one could complain about it because you're playing versus AI. The only bad thing that could happen was like there was that patch where they bugged it and you could kill. I think when like Karax dropped, you could like kill one of the objectives and the game would like stall out for infinitely until the player left. Like outside of griefing stuff, and I think that's one of the reasons why like the co-op community, everybody that I've talked to in that, and those guys are super hardcore. That's one of the awesome things about StarCraft is that you have that very well respected competitive side and a function that works RTS wise. Although personally, I dream of something like that co-op sort of direction for like for a competitive mode.
Oh, hells
Yeah.
yeah. And then I mean, if you, I'm so sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I think this is interesting because we can all really clearly sort of state like where we think you can go with the RTS genre in terms of campaign, in terms of co-op, in terms of, microtransactions. But it's really hard to say like, how do you get a better competitive game than StarCraft 1? Or I'm going to say Warcraft 3. I like games with heroes. Or StarCraft 2. Like how my most fun with a competitive RTS outside of StarCraft 2 in the last few years has been Tooth and Tail, but that's really like a totally different experience and like way more of a casual experience. But
it's a great game though. It's a great game.
It's a great game.
But like, how do you do you try to make it harder? Do you try to make it do you try to squish the learning curve? Do you try to like break it up so there's like it's like, I don't know, when you're playing soccer when you're 10 years old, you don't play with the same rules as you play it as when you're like the pros play it. Like you chunk it up into multiple versions of the game that different people play at different skill levels, and then try to balance those versions around. Like it's hard. You kind of have to like start getting real crazy with it to think about how you can take that competitive side further than where StarCraft 2 or Brood War has taken it. I don't know what to do there.
It comes down to what sets of skill sets you want to highlight as well from the players, right? Because adaptability, for example, is something that will shine in games that are actively changing, like say Dota 2 or League to a degree, but mostly like TFT is the auto chess games. Like some of them are very often updated. Artosis hates those. And StarCraft 2 was kind of like in a middle ground, right? Where it's like it gets the yearly updates and patches here and there that aren't as big, but it also doesn't have the model to be self-sustaining maybe on those fronts, right? Where maybe I think what Nate and I both dream of is an RTS that is actively changing, and maybe you never get to the level of Serral in this dreamland because everyone's having to reconstruct their play around what's good at a given point in time, but the game is dynamic enough that balance also doesn't matter too much because people are having to actively discover it. Right. I think that's my dreamland.
Yeah. And just to sorry.
Continue. Yeah, you go, Nate. That's cool.
I don't want to be the guy that interrupted Tim. You're good.
I was just going to say, I think there's also this big picture question that Adrian kind of touched on of there's a lot of innovation that's happening in the indie space, and we see hybrids of RTS with other games or sort of focuses on a single mode like they are Billions. But there's a question of, do you try to make incremental change and keep it fairly true to what we all already think of when we think RTS? Or do you try to clean slate like blue sky, come up with something radical and brand new? And both are probably valid paths. I'll say, having spent all this time with StarCraft and Command & Conquer before that, I see a clearer path towards incremental change, but the revolutionary change, like that could be awesome. I think it's less clear what will succeed in a revolutionary kind of adaptation of RTS.
Yeah, I guess just to clarify, like in this context, and I agree with you. I think that the basics of what makes RTS and Artosis definitely agrees with you, right? Like are there, right? I don't think that you could change StarCraft enough to where it isn't StarCraft anymore, so long as the engine remains, the core concepts of your mining minerals, trying to build an army, right? Like all these things and how much control you have over it wouldn't change via the via how strong units are, or influx of units in and out, or economic changes for that matters. Even though that might sound counterproductive or counterintuitive, right? Because I'm saying like the economy stays, but what I mean is the economical aspect stays, and that can be StarCrafts or Warcrafts or any type of economy. But you can still change the game whilst keeping its core concepts and what makes it an RTS, right?
Yeah, I would
That's what
hope
I'm
that
for.
whatever comes next does have those base elements of managing an economy, building base, building an army, attacking. But who knows? Like maybe something radical that changes that up can succeed. And that gets to another sort of vector off this topic, which was there was a PC Gamer article recently that posed the question of whether RTS could, in their words, come back from the brink of death. I totally disagree that RTS is in any kind of death state. I think it has a really healthy scene, but there's a hypothesis out there that the audience has just moved on. They've moved on to MOBA and Battle Royale and Auto Chess and all of these other things that have emerged. I guess to get ahead of it with my opinion, like RTS, I talked about, StarCraft 2 has this incredibly stable audience. So it's not the case that people are just fleeing from StarCraft 2 left and right. It is definitely the case that other genres emerge that capture attention and that become huge. And that by comparison, we start to feel insecure because there are all these other big things out there. But in my opinion, RTS is very healthy and will continue to be as long as everybody who's watching and everybody who's on this stream keeps playing it.
I'm really excited for Age of Empires 4. I don't know what that's going to be. I'm really hoping they change up some stuff with the formula and make Age of Empires 4 super cool. And
it's the next thing to be excited for, I think.
Yeah, hope they knock it out of the park.
Yeah, well, it's the only big RTS that's coming. Like it's right.
That has come in a while, actually. It feels.
Yeah.
Like,
what's the last big? Was there a big Command and Conquer anytime recently? No.
Halo's
really.
right. Halo Wars was the last
count
attempt
Halo
at a big.
Wars 2?
There was
well,
the
you count the attempt of Halo Wars 2, right? But I think it was not.
Yeah,
game didn't have PC.
It just wasn't good. Yeah.
That is a long time since then, and then. I'm excited about Age of Empires 4 as well, because it's just like, it's an actual big publisher making an actual, like, everyone likes Age games. Those ones, like Age 2, I think still has a really strong scene going on and everything. So like, hey, maybe this has some potential, but it does make me nervous because like so many things go wrong with the modern RTSs that come out. Like, I mean, the one that we always make fun of on the show is Grey Goo, where you're just like,
oh, it's so bad.
Who the fuck made Grey Goo? Like, what were you thinking? Like, who okayed this to go to be published?
Chances are high they're watching is the sad thing, right?
Well,
I'm sorry, but the game was wrong. You did it wrong.
Just to give those guys credit, they did go out on a limb and try something new, and that's Petroglyph, which consists of some original CNC developers who split off, and I think they're actually working on the CNC remaster right now.
Oh, cool.
But I think there was a lot of critical feedback around Grey Goo, but I do credit those guys for trying to be creative. I think.
I think Monk mentioned to me that the game had something really cool to it, which was like a cloud, like you could hide behind clouds for flying units or something that I thought
like bushes.
That's kind of cool. Yeah, clouds like bushes. That's kind of cool,
Okay.
I think RTS
sure if it was
is
them or someone else.
Yeah, when I think about the future of RTS, it does feel a little bit like a trial by fire thing. Like companies at some point will eventually, it's at some point new things are going to come out, and someone will have some idea, hopefully, right down the line, where they'll be like, this is how you do RTS and keep people interested, right? Or this is how you make a really good 2v2 RTS or something like that. In a way that can live in this modern environment. But I agree a lot with like what Tim said. It's a bit of like a Toy Story situation, right? We have the new shiny thing. It was MOBAs and then Battle Royale, and the attention of big companies hasn't been on that because this is actually, as a casual gamer, you see a lot of this when you look at companies when you're like, I want story games, right? A lot of the direction comes to companies looking at like what is more profitable, multiplayer games in a huge way. You compare like, well, was Was like the remake of Resident Evil 2 financially successful? Yes. Is it anywhere near close to any of these other titans, right? And I think that either at some point this slows down or Battle Royale like literally turns into some augmented reality crazy madness. I don't think will happen. But at some point, you know, all waves must crest. And I think companies down the line will end up looking around this stuff, and it's going to require innovation. I don't think doing the old formula of releasing a game where you have units and you have like, you know, if you're not Blizzard, you have a couple of maps that you're going to be stuck with forever, and then just letting people play that as it is. I don't know that you can release something like that and
It
expect
requires
it to
a
have
leap
any
of faith.
longevity.
It
Yeah,
requires
it's
a leap of faith from a
massive leap of faith.
large, from a large company, ideally, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I think to what Tim was saying and the hypothesis that RTS, you know, may not have any steam left to it. Yes, like the StarCraft community is stable, and you know, like we can call that RTS, and the Warcraft community is potentially like on the rise. I don't know how Reforged is going to be received, especially in China, right? Like that would be huge if it goes well. But with that said, there's such a gap in terms of the age, right? Like I think we're looking at like our players are no longer the players that are getting into gaming, right? And that is the audience that would be difficult to capture. That's where the leap of faith would happen, right? Where you're trying to capture a younger audience and expose them to a genre that they haven't been exposed to. And that is the difficulty. It's like we know RTS is great. We've been playing RTS for 20 years. But there hasn't been an RTS in so long that no one knows how it's going to go with the kids growing up.
Yeah, it's a great point that you can't really judge how healthy the market is until one of the market makers releases a new title. And, you know, in theory, there are all these players who have learned RTS camera perspective and sort of, you know, single unit micro through MOBA. There are all these other offshoots of RTS like Tower D or Clash Royale. You know, in theory, the right game could really attract that audience, but it's all hypothesis until somebody builds one. So,
yeah, there's people like Artosis teaching their kids, you know, StarCraft. So that's
you got to keep it going.
Essentially, some really cool stuff. Really cool stuff. I'll go back. I know it didn't end up being reported as a massive success, whatever that means, but I really liked some of the stuff that they tried with, like even the mobile Command and Conquer game they made with the way that you could hit up the armies and whatnot. Obviously, stupidly pay to win and tanked a lot of it, but there are a lot of good ideas in a lot of different spaces. And I like that you mentioned like Clash Royale as well, because at their core, if you play those games any decent amount, you get a very like RTS feel of, I have this resource that I'm getting, you know, however autonomously. This is how I'm using it. This is what they're doing. I know what I have available. Once I get into the game, I can't change what I'm doing, so I have to adapt on the fly. And like, honestly, a lot of StarCraft audience is pretty old, so I don't expect this community to necessarily jump on whatever that next thing is. So at that point, it kind of comes down to as well how much change does this community actually want to get bigger, you know?
But it's also there could be renaissances, like an example I'll pull out is like the classic RPG genre, like the Baldur's Gate 2, like that genre was dead. Like no one was making, like they made Dragon Age Origins and it was popular and people liked it, and then they were like, well, we're gonna make Dragon Age 2 a totally different thing that no one likes. And then now it's come back with Divinity Original Sin, with Pillars of Eternity, with these other titles. I'm super passionate about classic RPGs as well. But like I feel like there's a world in which it doesn't have to be that young audience. It can be the same, you know, older, more mature audience plus some younger audience that make something come back and really sing again. And I think that's a good example of it.
Yeah, to use a Blizzard example, I don't think if you go back some years that anybody at Blizzard would have predicted the success and just the cultural resonance of WoW Classic. And that is a great story of bringing new people into the game who wanted to experience what had been so hype back then, as well as players who loved the game getting to re-experience that. I think, you know, you look at other genres, space sims, that were considered passé that have a resurgence. I don't know. I think there's a real chance that that alone drives interest, but yeah, trying to figure out how to evolve it and make it more accessible to bring in a younger audience seems important too.
How do you like get big companies to pick this up and like move with an RTS? Because one thing that I thought was really funny and telling was Riot announced like 48 games that are in development, like every genre. They're like, okay, we're doing it now. Like we know how to do esports, but RTS was not one of them. Right. And I'm like, oh my God, like it's just getting so crazy. And like we mentioned, right, it's only Age 4 that's being worked on right now as far as high end game companies, which is kind of funny too, because that's not even like Ensemble or whatever. It's actually Relic making Age 4. So it's kind of this weird dual type thing. But how, like, if Blizzard, who's truly been the king of RTS, like Age and Command and Conquer are both great series, but StarCraft and Warcraft are the leaders for sure. How does that work? How do we get another great RTS? Because I mean, I want one.
Well, as somebody who's pitched a lot of RTSs over the years, I guess, it is totally possible that at some point in the future, Activision Blizzard or EA decide to do something new with the great RTS franchises that they've got. Again, I'm on the outside now, so I don't know Blizzard's future plans. It's also possible that something happens that triggers renewed interest in the space. It could be that Age of Empires 4 does really well. It could be that some indie title breaks through. I think Iron Harvest is something that's hotly anticipated. So any of those things could happen, or somebody could emerge, who's a new company, but comprised of people who have worked in RTS before that do something great. I know Homeworld 3 is being developed by some Relic veterans. So any of those things I think could really reinvigorate interest in the space. But yeah, who knows what direction it'll come from.
And I think a real reality as well that would have to be faced is how good does this game have to be to get a similar level of not just like player base, but emotional and long-term investment that like the StarCraft community has. How's that even possible? Which is another huge problem with the genre, because how the hell do you go up against what Blizzard built in the genre as well too? A huge deterrent to competition from anybody else, considering just how massive this game is 10 years later. How many games have that level of upkeep 10 years after in terms of player base, tournaments, content creation, etc.?
That if that was a restraint for them, wouldn't it be more of a motivator than anything else? Like the system can work to this degree.
Maybe a motivator for the people that are spearheading it, but the people that are going to have to approve a massive gamble, not so much.
I think one of the challenges too is that, and this is new in the world of games as a service, is that when you have games that exist for 10 years, they accumulate features and they accumulate stuff. It's why it's really hard to go up against Dota 2 or League of Legends in the MOBA space. And it hasn't happened in the shooter space because it seems like features and sort of that level of fine tuning isn't as important. But like if you want to go in and compete feature for feature with StarCraft 2, like the StarCraft 2 team has put in a ton of stuff that's really awesome for spec. We've got custom UIs, we've got all these different microtransaction things we can do, we've got reconnect to game, we've got resume from replay, we've got co-op, we've got all this like stuff in the game.
It's gonna be like Riot or Valve.
Really
everything
cool.
Everything
Yeah.
Everything in place.
Yeah, I see that. I mean, yeah, I think it's got to be from a big studio that the next RTS happens, like the next relevant competitive market-wise RTS happens.
Some of the smaller studios, I've liked some of the games that they put out. Tooth and Tail was great. I thought War Party was pretty cool. There's been some others that were like, all right.
There was a recent one that was a 2v2 game that was decent. Like, yeah, they're good.
Year of Rain?
Yeah,
That
Year of Rain
that
was
on
good.
Warcraft 3. Someone copy pasted the Warcraft 3.
Pretty
code.
much. Like, I mean, it had some difference. Had some.
That's
But yeah.
I don't know if I can stand behind that one, Cats, but
It has heroes, I guess. It does have heroes.
It does have heroes.
It
which
has
is
less heroes than
the
Warcraft 3,
cheap
though.
way out. People are like,
Yeah.
people
How
love
is
heroes.
that the cheap way out? What? No, heroes are great. What?
People love having a hero that can just beat everything. Wow, look, it's Goku, whatever. I don't fucking care. It's stupid.
Well, it gives you something to do.
It's an
as well,
awesome
right? Like,
fantasy, honestly.
It's about how you force engagements and such too, right? Like StarCraft does it really organically because you want to attack into Sargaster and like, right? But in other games, you kind of have to like have meeting points almost.
Yeah. Well, it does end up turning out that way quite a bit.
Well, look at the StarCraft community. You got plenty of especially that point is ingrained very heavily with like even just the community itself with the races that people play, the amount of animosity even between people themselves outside of the game because of the faction in the game. You don't see that. You actually do not see that as much in other games because
do you like that? Because I feel like
most people play several different, champions or heroes or whatever, where it's not as much like, everybody who plays this one guy, you have guys that you're weak against, but that's an interesting thing to consider, I think, as well, with what gets people engaged about it.
It's pretty cool. You would know about this.
StarCraft nails the fantasy part very well. I think that's a big part about why it's popular.
All right. Any other thoughts on the future of the RTS industry as a whole?
I hope a big studio makes a big RTS, or that Tim makes a big RTS, or someone makes a big RTS. Yeah.
Something I'd really like to see from an RTS, and it's something Tim and I have talked about, but the first thing is like a deep API that allows you to create matches so that tournament platforms can be set up. Like one of the cool things from CSGO is Faceit or ESEA, where they have these competitive systems that automatically put you in matches with people, and like it's super easy and was always a feature I tried to get shipped for StarCraft 2, but there was always more important stuff to get worked on. So there's that. And then the other piece is I think it would be really interesting from an esports perspective to have set match times. This is something we talked about with David Kim way back in the day, but have an RTS where the game is always 10 minutes, 15 minutes, somewhere around there.
How would that work?
You would have to have some sort of escalating, like they do it in WoW, where like WoW esports has like dampening, where you have sort of like forced conflict at some point in the game. Like I think again, it would have to be a totally different premise than what we do in esports right now. But yeah, I remember at one point we had, I think it's a mode in StarCraft 2, like it's an option in StarCraft 2 right now where you can set it where like the game ends after an hour and whoever has more XP wins or something like that. Like I think
you would have to design the game around that, I feel like, right?
As the game goes longer, static defense slowly loses its power.
But yeah, like that would be really cool from the esports perspective of being able to do something like a true sport where you can run a best of 3 in 45 minutes every time, and plan your ad breaks and your content around all of that. Because
I guess you would just have the lava map, but it's enclosing in every minute, right?
Yeah.
Well, you could have a thing like that. Parts of the map get cut off as the game goes on. Like,
that's I guess that's Battle Royale, but
it's crazy. It's crazy compared to what we have now. But in the future, the idea of something like that, some sort of thing that's like, hey, there's a cataclysm that's going to come down or whatever, it's not unreasonable to have something like
around it. Yeah.
I mean, because a lot of the problems with StarCraft 2 over the years in terms of balance have been games that go on forever. Like that's one of the primary.
Is that a problem with balance, or is it perception primarily, you think?
I mean, it's a problem with with creating esports. Like when you have to hold the qualifier over to the next day because matches are taking 2.5 hours and you have no way to resolve it because that's the right way to play the game. Like that's a fundamental issue I'd like to see. I think that can be addressed. It could be solved in the rule book.
Design, or through design. I think you can.
Yeah.
So, Adrian, you're saying more swarm hosts is what you want to see?
I want to play a game. Just only swarm hosts. The swarm host is the only unit you can build.
Good.
That 7-hour long match.
Definitely, I think what Adrian describes as a goal of having like time limited. There's a way to solve that with design. Objective based rather than just the current destroy the enemy army. But anyhow, yeah, I think from an esports perspective, there is so much more that RTS could do to integrate with esports, to even have We always work towards direct ladder ties, but I feel like we never really made that the experience that could be. There's a whole other area of innovation that we haven't even touched on, which is AI. Clearly, there's a lot that could happen there in the future for RTS too.
Yeah, that's actually I was going to bring it up before the RTS in general thing, but that was the other really big thing that I kind of wanted to bring up was, well, it is AI based, which would be AlphaStar, because it's kind of linked to everything else that we've talked about a little bit, because it felt like something that could get people more interested in RTS again. Obviously, we all heard about how like AlphaGo won, and then every Go board on Earth sold out and stuff like that. It's really been quite a boon to their game. And their game, it's a 2,000-year-old game. But yeah, I talk about everything in this esports mindset. It's so funny.
Yeah, that is
but
good.
yeah,
I didn't even notice.
But yeah, I mean, AlphaStar, it's kind of been like, for me, it's the most exciting thing that's happened in a lot of ways for a long time, but it feels like it petered off into, like, there's not been anything new since BlizzCon. I'm not sure exactly how much new is going to really come out of it at this point. So it's like, I don't know, it's a good topic to bring up, I think, because obviously everyone's been involved and interested in this.
Yeah, the exciting part definitely for the dev team in working with the DeepMind team to help support their research was just to start thinking about applications for that technology to the game. And we experimented with some things, like we experimented with a build order coach that would operate in real time and sort of, use data from actual games to make recommendations on what to build to help people play the game. And I mean, these are hard things to implement because, it turns out that the recommendations you want to make vary widely according to skill level of the player, even the meta in the region that they're playing in. And, just training a network successfully, because it would make some wacky recommendations. These are all really hard things to do, but that was an exploration of a possible application of machine learning in a way that could not just provide cool opponents for players to play against, but provide ways for players to get better at the game. I think that's kind of just like scratching the surface of ways to apply machine learning and AI to RTS. But definitely there's deep potential there. I think the AlphaStar team accomplished something really amazing. And as a separate company and a research organization, like, I'm not sure what their goals will be in the future, but I'm really fascinated to see what they do next. And maybe that's more work with StarCraft, maybe that's work in other spaces. But what they pulled off, like, I didn't even think it was possible when they started.
Yeah. No, it certainly, it felt like it was a very long way away. And obviously, they worked on it for quite some time before really bringing anything back to it. But I was a little bit, it's like, it put on a good showing, right? It did very well on the ladder, especially the Protoss aspect of AlphaStar. And then at BlizzCon, it had some great games against some really strong players, beat Serral a few times, not optimal conditions and all that.
Yeah, that doesn't count. You can't even say that without like really being dismissive about it, because it was Serral on a shed setup, okay? Like, if anyone has played on not their setup as a pro,
it's not legit.
I will make all the excuses for Serral here, because he would trash that shit.
Well, I completely agree.
I'll jump in with a perspective on that too, which is, I think over time, as the players who were working with DeepMind played against the agent, and I think I saw TLO in chat earlier, but these guys had an opportunity to really figure out how AlphaStar played. Just like pro players usually get that opportunity when they're practicing on ladder. And so by nature of understanding the opponent, like, TLO knows how to beat AlphaStar. And Serral was coming in cold. Like, he had no preparation, no ability to understand what tactics might work against this kind of opponent. So I agree that it was kind of stacked.
Well, you could argue the same for AlphaStar in relationship to Serral then. You can make
I
that
could,
same
yeah,
argument.
and I would, because I think that underscores the accomplishment. Like, that is amazing that this computer controlled agent can take on Cyril and win
on a shit setup though. Like that is like like I think I could give Cyril a game on a shit if he was on a completely different
Yeah,
setup.
that's
I heard the mouse was terrible. I heard awful things about that setup.
That
Did
stuff
any of you
does-
guys-
that
did
stuff
any of you guys
does
play?
actually matter. It does
I did.
matter.
Did you
I
guys
did,
play
yeah.
on that setup? You did,
I
Dan?
did.
No,
Yeah,
but I think I
it
heard-
was hard. I couldn't play my best for sure. I mean, maybe it beats me anyways. Its PvP is pretty damn strong, but yeah. I mean, I don't mean to say that it beat the world champion, but that's actually like I was
Loco beat
hoping
it.
that we were gonna get. I was hoping we were gonna get something like that at the end, like they had with
Yes.
AlphaGo, because it was so cool and so much fun watching that series and like watching the world watch that series. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel sad that
I feel robbed. So you were on the panel, like they didn't because Tim is saying he doesn't know what's gonna happen with them, but like on the panel itself, where they were explaining what they had accomplished and whatnot. Usually, what you would expect from that panel is a "what's next" type thing, if there is anything next, and there wasn't such thing, right?
Yeah, they didn't have anything that they told me like 100% they're doing, but they gave like a couple possibilities of ways that it's going to be researched further, but it didn't sound like there was going to be
StarCraft in it.
Well, I think that because they did so much work on it, there's like a lot of stuff that people can still study with their stuff. Like they laid the groundwork for a lot of stuff. This is my understanding. I'm not perfect in this in any way.
Right. Yeah, I
but
watched that. Yeah.
it seemed like there's not going to be like a world championship Cyril and stats and Maru versus Alpha Star, any type thing like that.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. And I think it's fair to say that for those guys, like they had very specific research goals that they wanted to accomplish with StarCraft 2. And for them, what they presented at BlizzCon, my perception is that they feel like they accomplished those goals. And their goal wasn't to make an AI that could beat every single living human on Earth. I don't think that's what they set out to do. Now, I'm with you guys that I think that would have been amazing to see. And I think every other exploration that they did prior, certainly with Go and some other less sophisticated game genres, they got to that point. So to me, I actually took them concluding, that they achieved their research goals with RTS without getting to that point as a testament to how amazing a genre RTS is. And the depth and complexity of the game that we all play is such that this incredibly sophisticated agent can't master it to beat any living human on Earth.
Yeah, it's like human beings won, right? For once, but it's not it's not publicized that way because we don't know, or it is very obscure whether they will continue doing anything or not, and they don't state anything on that regard. And it seems as if they will not, right? Just by the lack of statement there.
That's my sense.
Yeah,
Cyril should just challenge it. Cyril should just
call out Google.
Just
Cyril
call
should
him
just
out.
call out
Just
Google.
call him out.
Just Cyril on Twitter at Google. Like,
Alpha
bitch.
Star ain't got
What's
on
that?
me.
Google.
At Google, bitch, and then like something after, But
amazing.
But yeah, I mean that's kind of my take as well. Like I'm a little bit bitter, sour that it seems like that's the place where we stopped. And Tim, to what you're saying, I mean they can't state their goals in a way that is non-conclusive or that doesn't lead to the expectation that they've set otherwise, right? With chess and alpha go and whatever. So how do you feel the team internally felt in terms of like those expectations? Because and as a team director, right, as a game director, you will often, I'm sure, have to set expectations outwards that aren't the same expectations inwards, right? Because expectations outwards should be met, whereas inwards you can hope for much more.
Yeah, great question. Definitely, even going back to what Dan started with on this topic, like my hope in partnering with DeepMind was to have a moment like the moment that Go had, where we had a very high profile tournament on the world stage. And that Go tournament, it wasn't just the Go fans that were watching it, which has
Right.
to be a fairly specialized audience. I mean, it was mainstream media and just general interest around the world. That would have been amazing for StarCraft 2. And definitely I hoped that we would get that. But at the same time, I respect that that's a sort of commercial goal that's selfish, as the production director for StarCraft 2 versus DeepMind has their own research goals and questions that they're trying to answer.
Like they are a chicken would be one of the questions.
It sounds like Katz wants to take on Alpha Star. I don't know. But no, I really respect that. Their goals here were different than ours, and in the end, what we did wind up with was this amazing moment for the community, not just to see it up on the screen, but also to get to play against it on ladder. And I'm super happy that it happened, and I think it was really worthwhile for us. But it definitely would have been cool to have that moment that you're talking about.
Now, is there a way for Blizzard, you think, to capitalize now that you're on the outside and whatnot on the idea that humanity beat Google, or is that like, do you think that's a clause that is it just a perception that the community would have to push out and be like, okay, like, well, Google couldn't do what they could do in other areas, because from Google's perspective, I imagine they have to be very reserved in their failure, right? Because this is technologies that they want to apply outside of gaming as well, right? So they can't just be like, yeah, we couldn't beat Zero, but
it's difficult for them, right? Because then the other side is Fox News puts out a post about your kids about how video games are training robots to kill all of humanity as well, right?
I don't watch.
That's a really
we have
big
a
point.
war. We have a war AI that's playing a game that looks like it's killing people with armies and shit. There's some really easy way to spin it negatively for them as well if they do that.
Yeah, I think the takeaway for Blizzard that has downstream value is just how can we apply this technology to make our games better, and not even just StarCraft 2, but other Blizzard games. But I think what you're asking, Katz, is more about the publicity side, and from that perspective, I think as a community, like we as RTS players should feel really good that we play a game type that is so challenging. That Alpha Star can't 100% beat every human on the planet. Like, that's amazing. That says something about the genre. But I don't necessarily think there's like a PR message that should come out of that. But we should feel good about that. We play a good genre.
No, I think if we get to the point where you can actually have
Artosis feels so good. It's like so fun.
Yeah. I think if you get to the point where this stuff can be implemented like into game, like you're talking about, Cats, there's some people who don't play on ladder because it's just so scary, and like mastering beating the AI, while it can be hard for some players, is not like, it's very granular how much harder it gets, and then it stops at one point that is not very hard. Like, I think a RTS that came to market, if we're talking about innovations in RTS, an RTS that came to market with like really robust AI could be one of those things. I mean, with co-op being so popular and everything like that, like I think maybe it's not now, maybe it's like a 10 or 20 years from now sort of thing in terms of where the technology's at, but I would be hyped about that.
Fair.
Something that's sort of like a self-coaching RTS.
That would be cool. Kind of like Witcher. No, not Witcher. The Soul. What is the Soul game that's really hard? Because there's like, usually, like, I don't play against non-humans because you can figure them out so easily. But you're saying, like, take it up a notch with this technology type thing, right?
Yeah, that and also make it more adaptive. Like, I think people who play against StarCraft 2's built-in AI find the patterns, and there's sort of a limit to how varied that experience is. But just application of AI tech to make the game more interesting to play.
Yeah, and I don't think we can talk about it publicly, but there was some really cool like demo stuff that was showed internally, sort of using the machine learning technology to sort of tutor people and help them get better.
Yeah, the build coach stuff I touched on a little bit earlier. Yeah, and I think even replay analysis, and there's tons of potential application for that. And I don't even think we've had all the ideas yet. Like, we're still learning how to apply this technology, but it feels like there's so much that could be done with it. And it definitely, like, this experience of supporting the research that the DeepMind team was doing triggered not just thought process, but also development of expertise on how to build some machine learning tools in-house. So I think that could bear fruit downstream.
Cool. Very cool. All right. Anything else that you guys want to touch on before we jump into Patreon questions?
I just wanted to say, going back to the AI learning, I think about that in the context of like when people think that they've found like the ultimate campaign units, right? If a future like game, even in the story, like they use machine learning to be like, where does this person trip up if they only do this, right? And you could even build like a dynamic RTS campaign experience with that. So if someone thinks that they have like something that a normal AI would be really easily punishable by, that's just cool to think about that stuff.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Cool. All right. Well, this has been an excellent conversation. I guess we'll jump into the Patreon questions and see what the community wants to ask you guys. Again, if anyone wants to ask any questions, go over to patreon.com/The Pylon Show. You have a limited amount of time before the questions close for the episode. All right. Let's go ahead and start. Optional Player asks, PC Gamer did an article recently about the death of RTS and said no new RTSs have been able to follow in StarCraft 2's footsteps, that new patches and microtransactions were the new norm, and quote, right now, everyone seems to be excited about sequels and remakes. Thoughts?
I guess I'll jump in. We talked a little bit earlier about the article, and so I think the claim of being on the brink of death is probably exaggerated, but I do think the point that somebody made about how high a bar has been set now by all these years of development for StarCraft 2, that definitely will be a challenge to whoever tries to build the next great RTS, whether that's Age of Empires 4 or something else downstream. I don't think it's insurmountable, but it's definitely something that the developer of the next great RTS is going to have to think about.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that, guys?
Agree.
Kind of beat it already.
Thank you for the question. All right. Polly asks, you don't have to answer this, Tim. Tim, what was your highest MMR on the ladder?
This is where the sad truth comes out that I am hands down the worst StarCraft 2 competitive player on the team. And so, yeah, I don't want to answer that question. Adrian's very good, though. So Adrian should,
very
jump in.
good is a relative. My MMR,
Yo Goliath here, guys. He's just being shy.
I peaked at high, well, not mid-masters in Wings of Liberty, or not in Heart of the Swarm. But I didn't have time to practice that much, and now I play random, and I'm like low diamond. But yeah, I do okay. I'm a lot better than a lot of the other people at Blizzard. I took one game off Davey once. I took one game off Davey.
Nice.
That's my, and I beat HD StarCraft, but I lost to pain user. Those are my StarCraft achievements.
You lost to pain, losing to pain users and a chance.
But I beat HD StarCraft, so
that is cool.
Yeah,
that is pretty good. Yeah, that's pretty good. What about Husky? Did you ever play Husky?
Never played Husky.
All right.
You know, it's so funny. You guys like talking like, oh well, I mean, I'm not good, but because everyone I meet at like events and stuff, whenever I meet someone, like, oh yeah, no, I love StarCraft. I'm really bad. They always, they put their hands back and stuff. It's like, oh, but I'm really bad, and I'm just always like, man, we're all really bad. It's okay. There's like 5 players in the world that I will consistently just be like, no, he's really good, and then everyone else will be like, no, that's a mistake, and that's a mistake, and because the game is so damn hard. But it's just funny to hear people always kind of set the expectation that like, oh, I'm not good. It's like, no, you are.
It's all a matter of perception, right? Like where you want to be, where you see yourself. But yeah,
everyone performs at StarCraft less than they think that they should. Everyone. Everyone thinks they're worse than they feel like they should.
I'm exactly where I think I should. I am a ladder 1 trick that plays 1 base muta, and the highest you can get with 1 base muta is Masters in Heart of the Swarm before they put the Spore Crawler nerf in.
I've been snoot with
Awesome.
one base mute at a Red Bull tournament, so the
Nice.
statistics would disagree. With
Nice. All right. Excellent question there. Thank you, Polly. All right. Pylon Pefo asks, Dear Artosis and awesome guests, the Lingbane dance between two good Zerg players is my favorite part of all StarCraft as a viewer. What about yours? So viewership-wise, what do you guys really like to see in a StarCraft game?
So,
Tim, you want to go first?
yeah, I mean, I'm gonna totally catch criticism for saying this, but sitting in the audience, cheese is fun to watch. So
Sure.
I actually enjoy some cheese. Adrian?
I think the moments that get me the most excited, I would say like the era where Polt was just doing the crazy medevac, like sniping, like zooming around all over the map and destroying things. Like I really, especially when it devolves into the base race and is that super crazy end game, like moving units around. I remember one of my favorite moments that's just like crystallized in my brain is when Fantasy came into StarCraft 2 at first. I was watching some game of his and he literally had drops in every base, pick them all up and move them to another, all in 3 bases, and pick them all up and move them to a different part of the other bases. And like that kind of stuff that I could never do personally ever in a million years, like that, I love it. I love it so much.
Cats and Nathanius, what do you like?
I think that there's a lot of ways to answer this question, right? And like from a perspective of excitement, I think what will create the most excitement is the most uncertainty. And that is just hands down, right? And that's why like Baneling Bane is so exciting, because a Baneling can blow up, can end the game. It's like so sudden. Disruptors are units that can do that as well. So like there's certain units that just cause excitement. Terran as a race, Bio-Terran, like Adrian was describing, is a very exciting thing to watch because they have to constantly be aggressive because they have such micro ability, right? Which is why every Terran thinks that they're the hardest races, because they have to set the pace, because they have the units to do it in the early game. So I think that one perspective is excitement, and from that it's definitely difficult to argue that Ling Bane isn't one of the most exciting things to watch. And another area could be something like appreciating the game for its difficulty, which Artosis gets a hard-on for, or Adrian can admire, right? And look at someone and be like, I could never do that, like physically do that, right? And there's another area that you can enjoy, which is the strategy in itself as it happens, and like evaluating the thought processes of the players as they do it. And that's my favorite thing to watch, is just any game of StarCraft that has smart players that are actively thinking, actively thinking, because you can see it. That's the beauty of the game, is you can actually see what they're thinking, how they're thinking, or at least their patterns, right? Their processes. That's beautiful.
Yeah, for myself, I think when I think about matches that I've watched that I've enjoyed the most, it's always I love seeing players be creative. It's like, as far as like an exciting, like a super exciting thing, when I think back to games like Tasia versus Innovation, right, where you've got these great like slowed down split map, but both players still doing so much, looking for like these holes in the weakness, and that anticipation of the moment where one of them cracks under the pressure of like this high speed chase, so as soon as you go under 40 miles an hour, it's like boom, that's it. And that and as well as I love the creativity.
That's also the same thing, right? It's excitement because you don't know what's going to happen.
I think of it a different way, not as much as like it's like one engagement type thing, but I like that chess battle of the pieces being moved slowly, waiting for it, like that, and then just creative use of stuff that you haven't thought about yet, which is the best thing about StarCraft, is that never fails. At least once or twice a year, see something. I'm like, this game's about 10 years. I know I'm going to see something this year that I've never seen before. It'll be awesome. Like first time Bomber used the Seeker missile on the medevac and sent it into those mutas, whatever, like 6 years ago.
Oh yeah.
Stuff like that I'm like, I never thought about doing it like that. That's what I enjoy seeing the most in StarCraft.
I'm here if you want to send me some flowers, Nate.
Your games are always fun to cast. I just hate playing against you.
Fair.
Yeah, I really like watching very difficult to make strategic choices. Those are the ones that really get me. Like, I remember the first thing that popped to my mind was like a game where Stats was having a hard time PvP recently, and then he was in this game and he was getting blink, and the situation was not correct for making stalkers. So he actually didn't make more than his initial 4 stalkers. And I was just like, yes, oh, he has blink and everything. And everyone on Earth would make stalkers here, but it's right not to. And like being able to kind of pull yourself back from that and not feel like, yeah, those types of moments, they're like kind of rare, but you'll see them and you're like, that looks so weird to have blink and 3 or 4 stalkers, but it's right. Like that you didn't go further. All right. Thank you for the question, Pylon Pefo. Nahyun asks, describe your job as badly as possible. Okay. Yeah.
I think what I would always use like at family gatherings was like, well, my job is going to meetings and writing emails, and that's what I do all day is go to meetings and write emails. So there's that.
Okay.
That's me.
Oh, that taints your, because I love going to meetings. Like if I could just go to work and just go to meetings all the time, like this is a meeting, right? Like it's just like you just throw ideas and you just like talk about shit. Oh, that's my jam. So like what you're describing is the dream job right now.
But you're like expected to get done. You have a tournament like that's supposed to happen 7 days from now, and like other things need to happen for people to get fed and people to like show up on time and all sorts of things.
Let's see. Yeah, I guess my bad description would be sort of all of the frustration of planning the game with none of the satisfaction of actually implementing the game.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean that's a brilliant description, because all good comes with bad, right? Like the struggle will lead to a release of sorts, no matter how you look at it. So it's very difficult to think of something that's strictly bad about anything that you try to do skillfully, that you put time into it. So yeah, I have nothing.
Nothing. Okay, Nathaniel, how about you?
I just shout. I shout at a screen. That's my bad description.
Yeah. I don't know how to poorly describe what I do. I'm like, I play and talk about the game I love. I don't know.
Yeah.
See, that's not very bad. Yeah.
I breathe.
I guess sometimes the thing is sometimes you'll get bored. Like over the last 10 years, sometimes I'll be bored and not play, but then it just resets and then I'll play again and I'll stream again. You know, so it's like there's parts that go down where your experience goes to a low, but in light of that low you can experience a new high. So it's like, can you really like blame the low? That's very difficult, right?
No, you need the lows for the highs.
Yeah.
Nahyan, thank you for the question. HyperTurtle asks, what are the biggest misconceptions about the StarCraft franchise and the RTS genre? What has made StarCraft 1 and 2 so much more sustainable than other RTS games?
Wow, that's a multi-part. I guess biggest misperception about the game of StarCraft 2 is that it's just a 1v1 competitive game. We talked earlier about how everybody seems to think that's the only thing that StarCraft is, but it campaign players, co-op players, even arcade players, like there's so much more to StarCraft 2 than 1v1 competitive. I think biggest misperception about RTS as a genre is that it's dead. It is so not dead. And sustainability, to me, and this is me now talking, as somebody who came to Blizzard after StarCraft 2 and StarCraft 1 had been released and is now outside Blizzard. I think they are some of the best games ever made. And they're just great games. Like that keeps people there. But the other thing that I touched on, and to give 1v1 competitive the credit it deserves, it's also, I think, the best esport in the world. And that really keeps people engaged with the game. I don't know. Who else wants to jump in?
I think something that's funny, Tim, is when you a lot of your and my work and a lot of what we did with StarCraft 2 was combating the dead game meme. And now that we've left Blizzard, the new mission is to combat the dead RTS meme. And so you've just leveled up, Tim, in terms of your responsibilities. Now you have to save RTS for everyone. I think I'll take a crack at this. I think the biggest misconception is that only Korean players are good at it, and it's a game only played in Korea. That's just the biggest. Like, you run into it not in the more hardcore gaming circles, but outside of that is what it is, which is sort of the ultimate expression of the it's only a 1v1 game is it's only a 1v1 game and only certain people are good at it. And then I think what's made StarCraft 1 and 2 so much more sustainable is I honestly think is it's a reinforcing thing with how long the games have been out. Is one thing that I started to make a priority with designing my esports products and sort of how I thought about is I want to capture those people that played StarCraft 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. Like, there's this huge pool of people. Like, when you get into a new RTS, when you get into a new esport, there's an inherent difficulty in understanding what the hell's going on the screen. But people understand what's going on in StarCraft, like, inherently. Like, oh, there's Marines and alien bugs and Egyptian aliens fighting each other, and that's what it is. And that's like one of its greatest strengths, is that it sort of has a core flow of the game, and you can not have watched for 10 years and come back and understand exactly what's going on.
Sure.
I love that the biggest misconceptions are answered from a scope of where Tim sits or sat as game director, essentially, right? And then Adrian zooms into esports, and so I'll zoom in further as a player and say the biggest misconception in that area is that and we've even reinforced this negative misconception during this show in itself, which is that people should learn build orders, for example, as opposed to just learning why something makes sense in the game. Understanding, trying to making the real-time strategy real-time as opposed to preemptive. Yeah.
Okay. Great answers. Thank you for the question, HyperTurtle. Soft Scissors asks, what's the preferable donation type for StarCraft 2 content creators? Twitch sub, Patreon, Twitch donation, etc.
Nate would be good to answer that first.
Yeah, I mean, if you just asked me straight up, you're like, if I wanted to give you $5, what's the best way to do it?
Hey, mommy.
Just a Twitch just like a straight donation through PayPal. Twitch, this is a fun thing. So you can't talk about your own stuff, but pretty much anybody that you watch on Twitch, for the most part, Twitch is going to take half of anything, sub-wise, that you're going to give them. So if you want to donate, if you want to give somebody 100 subs, right? If you want to spend $500, the streamer is going to see 250 of that, most likely. A few people will get more. So if you were like, I want to give this guy $500, I mean, the way that's going to give them the most cut of that is going to be through a PayPal donation. A lot of streamers like the subs, of course, because it's one of those numbers that people regularly check on. So there's kind of it feels crazy to say this, but I haven't done this shit for too long now. It's like a mental health thing when you look at your sub count and you see that it's not below a certain number, right? You think about that. So there's really no wrong way to support somebody, and I'm not particularly picky myself. I really don't mind. Just mostly being transparent. If you want to give someone as much of the money as possible, a PayPal donation is where you're going to get the least amount of fees, basically.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reality of it. I agree with Nate, though. Subscribers are a measure of progress that's more tangible than because we're always trying to organize chaos in the future tense and to see what projected income we will have as human beings, and it's a very unstable place from that perspective. Not to say that people can't expect a minimum, but there's high fluctuations for a streamer or a content creator, right? So subscribers are definitely one of those things that you look to try and keep consistent, or that you can use as a maybe more a more discernible way to see whether you're growing or not. Whereas a donation, you can't as easily say, okay, like I will expect to make this much in donations next month also.
Yeah.
Right. So
Mhm.
Twitch does take a cut for some more than others, though. I think a lot of people have a lot of like some deals in place. I do. So
It looks
subscribe
like
to our show.
Patreon. It looks like Patreon's only like 5 to 10%. So
Patreon's good, yeah, for consistency. Yeah, Patreon's good
Yep.
for that consistency and like security essentially, and low fees.
Mhm. All right. Thanks for the question. Blinker asks, Tim, what games have you drawn inspiration from or thought, wow, I'd like to make something along this line someday?
Wow. I really have been fortunate to work in a lot of different genres over the years. I love RTS, and I hope to have more opportunities to work in RTS. So yeah, I guess looking at other maybe non-Blizzard RTSs that I played and enjoyed, I really did like Generals. I was working on something in the Generals universe at EA. And I think a lot of people know this, but Dustin Browder was also involved in that product, and I think it informed some of his thinking around sort of race asymmetry and other things that he did get involved with later on with StarCraft. But yeah, CNC series. I certainly played Total Annihilation back in the day. And looking at other genres, I'm really fascinated at how other genres could positively impact the future of RTS. Like, are there certainly War 3 explored RPG aspects that could come into RTS, but is there more, say, Diablo-esque stuff that we could do in RTS? Even casual games like farming games, they have incredibly deep tech trees, and yet they have a very casual player base. Like, I think there are lessons for us to take from those kinds of games about how to onboard players without overwhelming them and scaring them away. So anyway, rambling answer, but those are some thoughts.
Great. Thank you for the question, Blinker. And Nescu asks, explain something about Brood War economies to me. Drones die to become buildings. SCVs are occupied while making stuff, but Terran has no mules. Probes don't have either problem and also have faster acceleration. Doesn't this make probes just better? And how doesn't this make the game super imbalanced? So, I mean, what you say is true. And the thing that one of the big ways to fix imbalance is by having an infinite skill ceiling. So that is a giant part of why StarCraft 1 and StarCraft 2 function so well, is because you can just get better and get better than your opponent at all times. There's nothing that'll stop you dead in your tracks, basically. There's not just like, oh, this part is broken and it will kill you. So
yeah, I think this ties into something that Adrian mentioned earlier, which is like the perception of balance being tied to say who has the stronger late game, right? And that's why I asked back then, like, whether this is a perceptual issue or a real balance issue. Because if a race has the possibilities to enact on other strengths at other points in the game, right? Because what you're describing essentially is one area of the game where people are like mining resources, or whatever in the early game or as economy develops, but that's just one lever out of many levers. And because the game is asymmetric, your army maybe is a little bit worse than the other armies, but your economy is a little bit better, and you can achieve balance through that. And the balance is always just a perception of fairness, right? And this perception of fairness, I think the best metric for it is if you have enough of a player base to draw conclusions, and win rates across different areas of that player base. Ideally, for me as a competitive player at the competitive level, is somewhat even, right? So to where it's close to 50%. But realistically, you never can know whether one race, and this will be true, right? Because if you only had one race, you would still have a best player in the world.
Exactly.
So you can never know where the best player is, in which race he is.
yes.
So yeah, that's. that's a problem in itself. So that's why it's perceptual, because there's too many factors to take into consideration to actually determine like which races.
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing that people don't understand about RTS games in general, is that there's always going to be an easiest to play race. There's always going to be a hardest to play race. It's always going to feel skewed certain ways. Like, and I think that that's where we get, like, for instance, lots of Terran whining, where I think Terran is a bit harder to play than Zerg and Protoss. And so a lot
different
of people are like,
fronts, on different fronts.
balance.
Like, I think,
Yeah.
like, this is an unpopular opinion. I've said it before in this show, but I think that Terran players on average are probably the dumbest population in StarCraft 2. Right? And I take it with a grain of salt, but like, Terrans are the population that, and maybe excluding people like Nathaniel, who is actively trying to do his own stuff and rush battle cruisers and come up with creative solutions. But for the most part, Terran is the race that initiates conflict. And as such, you can actually follow a build order to the letter with Terran, more so than with any other race. So where you might see mechanical complications as making the game harder, on other aspects, like deciding on your strategy, you have the game much easier, right? So it's about being the best in your race and your skill sets. Yeah,
I love that take. It's the thing I hate the most about Terran, actually, is, and it's a big part of the race's identity, is how rigid that structure is. It's one of the better things, I think. It's one of the things I like about, like, playing Protoss, for example, or watching, like, smart Zergs, is you're so much more freedom to be on the fly, but at the same time, and I think that's one of the reasons why Terran has a higher population as well, because anybody can just read a build order. There are no good build orders you can read for any of the other races because of the way that the game works. Whereas for the most part, you could literally do the same thing every single game as Terran, and most of your adjustments are going to be past that phase where you have to make decisions on infrastructure and tech like that.
I had a
and even then you'll be locked.
Stupid, but
I didn't call them stupid. I called them more stupid than the other two races. On average. There's a
we have that on the record.
I had a silver player beat me with a 6 racks all in one time. Just another coworker, silver player, silver Terran guy, just looked up a 6 racks all in build, didn't prep for it right, got rolled over. I think one thing I will say, to answer the question more specifically, I think there are offsets in Brood War where, like, Zerg doesn't have to, like, technically mechanically in building the game, like, Zerg doesn't have to build multiple tech structures to like both in order to get enhanced production of a specific unit type. Protoss and Terran have to do that, and then, like, Terran has some things like they can save CCs by floating them and other mechanics that enhance stuff. Like, there are offsets all throughout the game. And then I'll say super late game, there's a big trend with Brood War where they balance it via maps. Like, maps can really impact balance as well. And, like, I think there was a ASL last year, the year before, where, like, Protoss players had been winning everything, or Protoss players hadn't won anything, so they just changed the map pool to radically alter balance. And it, it was so that Flash would win.
That's right.
Yeah, you can understand what the strengths of a race are on this from a design perspective. I think they're super clear in StarCraft, right? I think that Terran Bio has, like, a clear army advantage to the point of which you can micro units more so than, like, Reapers, right? Like, Reapers have no real counter. Like, if you lose your Reaper early on, it's because you fucked up, right? And it's the same for Hellions versus Zerglings, or for, like, the micro that you do with your medevacs until there is, like, air or something like that, right? And that's why players like Maru set the bar so high, because they can take such efficient advantage, not just in how fast they click, but also in how they use these units, right? Whereas Zerg by design has creep, so you have to step on creep if you want to fight Zerg, right? And then if you're Zerg, well, you're fighting at a disadvantage if you don't have creep. So that is by default, like, from a design perspective, a thing that will help and enable Zerg defensively, right? And Larva, and the fact that you need, like, one building for just one building to create any number of units from the larva that you have, makes it so that Zerg is incredibly reactive, right? Whereas Terran is proactive. So and Protoss is like the tech race, right? So if you were to equate it to animals, it's like Protoss is like a snake that's always trying to, like, hide shit from you, and, like, if it manages to successfully, then it wins. So that's why people always hate Protoss, right? It's like, fucking DTs, they showed up, right? And I wasn't ready, and that's what people hate about Protoss. but that tech advantage is like one of the things that makes it beautiful. And Zerg is like reactive, so there would be something like a chameleon, and Terran would be something like a monkey, right? Like an angry monkey. That's just.
Well, quite an answer. Thank you, Cats.
I'm glad we're all very capable of being pleasant and civil with one another today.
Yes, indeed. All right. Thank you. Thank you for the question.
Got him.
Quite an answer out of that one. Sate Zero asks, describe your most vivid memory of a tough StarCraft Brood War or StarCraft 2 loss in the best detail you can. Expletives are encouraged. Bonus points if you aren't anti-Protoss monster like Dan. Much love. All right. Does anyone have a loss that they can describe vividly?
I have
What was the
one.
question?
Describe vividly a loss in detail.
I have one off the top of my head. So for a while, the manager for Blizzard Korea Esports was called Cookie Bong. He was a former Brood War pro called The Boy. I believe you can look up some old like televised matches of him. And he had come over and we had a few beers. And I had been practicing some basic like all-in build orders, and I challenged him to a match thinking that I could cheese him out. And I marine rushed him or something dumb and killed his like first zealot, but then he managed to hold it off, and then he just brutally embarrassed me, and he ended the game by moving in with 200 worth of dragoons, and then coming and standing behind me and just laughing at me, and then was like, "Go look at them. Go scan in the middle of the map. Go scan in the middle of the map." And he'd written GG in pylons.
Damn.
And I had built one tank at that point, and that was the end of the game.
Ouch.
Brutal. That is brutal.
Anyone else have a vivid loss?
I'll go next. The wonderful feeling of defending like a run by or a counterattack, and then being like, all right, I'm gonna go push, I'm gonna counterattack myself and go attack this guy and win. And then like your army dies, your bases start to die, and you're like, oh shit. And you look at any game where I've looked back and saw that I still had my depots in my main raised, and I've got like 6 tanks and like 10 Hellions just chilling at my ramp trying to derp their way down. There's actually almost nothing that makes me feel more pain when I like screw up in a game than that.
Yeah. I'm not one to dwell on losses, but the one that I have most vivid is in my head a perceptual win, right? Which was the game against Cyril in the Nation Wars that I played, where I did the Evo Chamber thing. That was so exciting because I knew I was gonna lose, right? Because it's Cyril. And then it's like, okay, like what do? I have to do something cool. And so for like an hour or two, I thought about like, what can I do? And this is something that I had never tried. And then I thought of it. And then I messaged like Vive and a laser, and the laser answered too late. So I went in with Vive and I tried it, and it worked twice, right? And I was like, okay, like I'm ready, right? And then I thought that there was a high chance that the Evo Chamber block would work against Cyril to kill his hatchery, and that would be the peak of it, right? Like I would be happy with that. And then it worked. And then I had no transition because I'd never done anything like this before. So it's very difficult for me to like look at that loss and feel bad. But like over the next few days, I kept wishing, oh, wow, I wish I had actually worked on this, right? I wish, because it felt like I was so far ahead. And if I managed to beat Cyril and just like, because our Aligulag was 0-0. I think if I won that game, I would have forfeited the rest of the Nation Wars. And then I would have just, let Cyril take it anyway, right? Because there was no way I was going to beat him again. But then my Aligulag would say 1-0 Cyril forever. So that's my one regret, my vivid loss.
Damn. I understand. I don't know. I have so many vivid losses every day on my stream. And expletives occasionally occur during that. But it says bonus points if you aren't an anti-Protoss monster, so I guess I can't tell any of those stories because it's the only race I hit on the StarCraft Remaster ladder. All right, Tim, do you have any vivid losses?
I'm so easy fodder for people to just destroy. I think too many to have one that stands out. So
understandable. All right, thank you for the question, Say Zero. Our very own Alessander asks, Tim/Adrian, did a ladder encounter or playing the game ever lead to change in the game in some way? Like adding a feature, nerfing, buffing, etc. And then for everyone, we have pizza tournaments, but what food would you sign up to play for? Okay, so did you guys ever have like a game that you played that helped you to decide to nerf something or buff something? This would be a great thing if one of you was like, yeah, no, I lost this bunker rush, so I changed the bunker build time. Is there anything like that?
That's that, if we had the balance team here, that might be a true story. But yeah, the reality is, since my job wasn't specifically to tune balance, certainly not one of my games. I think the only things I can think of that might fall in that category is, sometimes after we push a release live, the team will play games to make sure that everything is as it should be, and we'll discover that something slipped into the build at the last minute and needs to get fixed, or there's some kind of back end problem that's causing problems with games. But I think from a broader perspective, the adding a feature part, definitely a big part of how the team goes about deciding what features to build. Some of it clearly comes based on feedback and suggestions that we get, but some of it also just comes from playing the game and looking for opportunities to try to make the experience better. But yeah, as far as like playing a game and having one outcome lead to a balance change, I can't think of an example there. Adrian, you got anything you can think of?
I think not specifically from me, but I think a really interesting thing that something that people might find interesting is, so at Blizzard, we're, as employees, are not supposed to talk like publicly about the games. Like if we have a really frustrating loss or something like that, it's not something like I can go on Reddit and go, hey, Protoss is bullshit, like they need to be nerfed. So the replacement for that is email threads within Blizzard. So there's like an SC2 fans email thread, a Heroes fans email thread, there's a Hearthstone feedback email thread, and these just get sent out to like hundreds of random employees plus the dev team who have signed up to be on this email list. And one of the main users of the StarCraft 2 fans list was a legendary man named Tom V. Thompson. I hope you're listening, Tom. And Tom is a silver, maybe gold now, maybe masters Terran player, who definitely would sometimes just get really mad about certain games he had played. And it was really cool to have that like really intimate experience with like your coworkers where you had this place. I definitely sent one of those emails about, I was playing Hearthstone Arena and they had just added a card and I thought it was the most broken card ever added to Hearthstone. And I just wrote that super ranty email. And every once in a while, someone would have to send an email and be like, guys, these are your coworkers. They made this game. You have to be nice about it. You can't be this mean. But like, just like, all of those, shit posts that you get on Reddit, it's the same exact thing, but in like an email list within Blizzard. And I always thought that was really cool that was the sort of company that it was, that you could do that and it didn't get too personal too often.
Yeah, I think I've worked with a balance team enough that I could answer this question from my perspective. I try to be as unbiased as possible, right? And I recognize like where my skill set is at a given point in time, which is to say, just because something isn't working for me, it doesn't mean that it's not working for anyone. But I can take my experience and see whether something that isn't working for me also isn't working for anyone else, or right, and talk about that and bring it up in discussion. Like that kind of thing happens, but also concerns of players is like when I try to go back and give feedback to Blizzard and the balance team, I'll always try to survey a lot of pro players and have a discussion even with pro players before going in to try to get consensus around certain ideas of what should really be touched and what really shouldn't, because sometimes it's much easier when there's consensus, because again, balance is very perceptual, and I think that the opinions that matter most would be of those that are playing the game at the top level.
And the second part of her question, there's pizza tournaments, but is there a food you would like to sign up to play a tournament for?
Hazelnuts, was it?
that is a tournament coming up, yes.
Yeah.
If they're delivering it locally, I would play a nightly like sushi cup. Hell yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go.
Oh,
Give me that
okay,
salmon, baby.
okay.
Give me that salmon.
Sure. Okay. Good enough. I can't think of any food that I would sign up to play, and I live in Korea, so I think they'd have a hard time sending
What about-
it, even if I won, which I probably wouldn't.
What about some like cheesy ramen? What about some cheesy ramen?
Some cheesy ramen. There you go.
I don't need cheesy, but
Bring a cheesy ramen to my door. All right.
If you're ever
Excellent.
in Korea, get cheesy ramen, guys. It's an
tasty.
experience.
Sounds awful.
Mm. All right. Thank you for the question, Alessandro. We have Fear Dragon asking. Okay. How do you get Paulo to give you a low five? Ask him to Paulo.
Damn it.
For Tim and Adrian Brody, what was your dream idea in StarCraft that didn't end up coming to fruition? Why did you like it, and why didn't it work? Thanks for everything. Love you guys. Mountain-sized, air-based cooling solution. All right. Our good old Fear Dragon.
That's a good one. I guess I'm going to touch on one that I was advocating for a long time, which was having a, we called it a watch tab for a while, but basically just having the integrated ability in the game to browse video content. And that could include esports tournaments. It could include tutorials. It could include content from you guys. And we were going to do it. It was one of those things that was super complicated to coordinate because of just like licensing issues around video codecs, the need to coordinate with Twitch, and you want to have some control over the advertising that appears in your game client. It just, there was so much overhead around getting this feature implemented that we never got to do it. And I think that would have been kind of a way to make all of that content more accessible directly in the client, and certainly to highlight esports tournaments when they were happening with video in the client would have been really awesome. But yeah, it just didn't happen.
Yeah, that's so sad. I actually made the presentation about this exact thing on one of the summits that we did.
I remember that. Yeah.
Heartbreaking, yeah.
All right.
I'll jump in with mine.
Yeah.
It's actually, I'm going to do two. One was that I always wanted corruptors to be sort of like, I always was frustrated as a Zerg player with corruptors sort of being boring anti-air, and my pitch to fix them was always to make it so that when they died, they created an AoE like poison cloud, so that you would have like micro, where you would micro your corruptors in as they got low, because they're very tanky, right? Like as they got low, you would micro them out into your opponent's army and not have it do a ton of damage, but like do something, so it felt like when you had corruptor, you were using corruptors, it wasn't just like target firing. That, and then my other idea was my like big master idea for StarCraft, if I had been in control from the beginning, was just to move everyone to Korea. Like so much of StarCraft is difficult, like OWL, like they moved everyone to LA. Like it's so much easier if everyone's co-located. And I'm like, what if Blizzard, instead of doing WCS 2012, instead of doing whatever, had just like, Blizzard at that point had already put a ton of money into Korea. GSL was established, like ton of stuff. Like what if they just like started the, StarCraft, Hogwarts in Korea, and like just started a StarCraft league in Korea, but with paying to send out all of the up and coming sort of like global players, and still like feed everything to Korea. And we kind of did that. Like we like when Brood War was coming out, it was kind of like there was a lot of talk about, should we do stuff like, will we grow it outside? It's like, no, it's going to be in Korea where we do Brood War. And so, but like, yeah, I would also, esports production is super cheap in Korea. Like there's a bunch of reasons to do it. And so I wish I had that time machine that I could go back in time. Dan, I know you'd like that.
That would be nice.
But to have centralized all esports production in Korea and have that be like the actual mecca of esports.
Could you have the same thing in two places at once, that being Korea and outside of Korea, for example?
Yeah, you could do like LA and Korea, but at some point you have to do things that would be really unpopular with players, like basically say we're not sponsoring flights anymore. And it's something we talked about a ton in esports. Like, what if we just up the prize pools and then didn't sponsor flights anymore? What if we just converted that monetary investment over? Like, would you be able to count on players showing up? Would you be able to do a bunch of other stuff? But yeah, if you stop having to pay for flights, it drastically decreases your operating costs.
Yeah, because I agree with you. And early on, I kind of had the same hope for esports to develop organically rather than with Blizzard helping that, right? To where EG was located in San Francisco, for example. And so when we as Root made a team house that was supposed to, hold some of the rest of the best North American players, essentially, we also put it in San Francisco, and we were hoping that that was a trend that happen more to where we can have a San Francisco or an Californian type pro league. Now, the issue that I see with Korea in itself is that if you export non-Koreans to Koreans, you're going to have lower volume of non-Koreans go into an environment that's extremely difficult for them to succeed in from the beginning, right? So because they don't speak Korean, they don't have all the infrastructure, you would have to have them be absorbed into different teams, and again, the viewership is not really in Korea to begin with. So I think that the same idea but separate is what I would have done, basically what we have now. To Korea and North Korea.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways you could have done it, but something like that where you try to geolocate everyone early on.
Cool. Thank you for the question, Fear Dragon. Two more. We have one from Washburn21. He asks, do you think other RTS games would be more successful / interesting if they didn't have the same win condition as StarCraft, i.e. 1v1 deathmatch? So instead of being a worse version of StarCraft, it was something completely different.
We talked a little bit about that earlier. I do think different objective-based win conditions are really interesting. I don't think they're necessarily mutually exclusive. I think it's possible to have a variety of win conditions, including the StarCraft win condition. But yeah, I love that idea. I think it's fertile ground for exploration.
I think. Sorry.
I was just going to say that the thing is, my brain always just gets back to killing your opponent so quickly with this. It's like, let's say you had to capture a point on the map and that was your objective. Yeah, I know I'm short-sighted in this in my thinking, but I feel like first people would meet at the objective and then they'd figure out, well, we should do something before that we get to that point on the map or whatever. And eventually I'm like, well, if I kill his army, I can just go and take it. And I don't know, I feel like it would boil down quickly. I have a hard time imagining something other than killing your opponent.
What if it was at 15 minutes? What if there was basically the resources lost differential was the score, and at 15 minutes the game ended and the person with less resources lost won? I know you'd have to solve some issues with encouraging aggression there and how things work out, but I think there's something there where you sort of have a score-based system where you sort of have the normal RTS play out. I don't know. That's I haven't put a ton of thought into this, but
what if you had a wonder? What if you had a wonder that was invulnerable until 15 minutes? There you go. Boom, boom. Or if you built it, you win.
Tons that could be done for sure.
Yeah. I do agree with Artosis though, and I think every other genre outside of RTS, no matter what other weird stuff they try to throw in, at the end of the day, if you're winning, you are definitely kicking someone's ass. That is whatever all those games' objectives are. It's still important to have that. I don't think you want to eliminate the objective of killing your opponent, but the objective should be something that discourages the game from going too long, more than becoming the primary focus of the game. My opinion.
Cool. All right, thank you for the question. Last one, NeosteelEnthusiast asks, you've discussed most questions I've thought of. Thank you for the incredible episode. So I'll bring up something Tim said offhandedly. Tim or anyone else, please pitch us a new RTS game.
All right, I'll take a stab at it. If I were going to approach, and Dan's not going to like this, I'm just going to preface it.
We're just gonna have a hero in it. No.
Yeah, I really, I think there's a perception that the hero-based gameplay in War 3 was in some ways more broadly accessible. There's definitely evidence in Star 2 that co-op appeals to a broad audience. I think there are benefits to larger player count formats, like we're limited to 2-player co-op currently in Star 2, and that's just against the AI. If it's not April Fools, we don't have head-to-head co-op. So I think that all suggests that there is something hero-based with a higher player count, cooperative against AI, that still supports some hero versus hero gameplay. I think some of those other aspects of War 3 that are perceived as making it more accessible, like smaller army count, I think some of the item-based elements of War 3 were intriguing, like bringing in some of those RPG aspects. So yeah, I would, those are all things that are very interesting to me to see in a next gen RTS. And the last thing I would add is I think there's an opportunity to introduce more that happens in between missions, kind of more goals that persist beyond the end of a single match. And whether that's territory conquest or it's item collection, or there's so many things that you could layer on there. But just based on what I've seen with Star 2 and with what's going on with War 3 Reforged, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff to look at there.
And for the record, I do like RTS games with heroes. I just like ones without. I really like Warcraft 3. I use it as a punching bag sometimes to make my point about how good StarCraft 1 and 2 are. All right. Excellent. All right. So that's all of our
heroes can be hard.
Yeah, sure, they can. Yeah, I played Heroes of the Storm for a long time. I like the game. I like things that aren't StarCraft. It's just I do realize, rightfully so, that
you are a Hearthstone world champion after all. This is coming from a Hearthstone world champion. Yeah. Didn't even mislead. Didn't even.
Not that time, at least. Opponent, All right. So a big thanks to all of our Patreon supporters, especially Astrophin, Field of Sins, Jerry Wang, and Manard at the $100 tier. Guys, apparently we were informed that some of the new patrons might not have access to our past pre-show banter segments, which were sent out. So Cobra is making those into segments, into new posts on our main Patreon page, so that new supporters can see those as well. Thanks for your patience and support.
Some of those are spicy, by the way.
Yes, some of them are, especially when Katz is on the show.
Oh, I don't know.
All right, yeah, you guys check out the Patreon, of course, and check out the pylonshow.com, because that is where all of your Pylon Show needs are met. Matcherino.com/the Pylon Show. Type in "it burns" as the code to give us free money this week. And I got to say, this was an excellent episode. It was beyond my expectations. Thank you so much, guys, for coming on. And let's just see what you guys are up to. Nathanius, where can people find more of you? What do you want people to know before you go?
Just streaming every day. To take a day, one day off a week. Tons of StarCraft, a little bit of other stuff mixed in, and I'm putting cold cast games. I'm doing a little casting series on my YouTube. Just YouTube Nathanius, Twitch Nathanius, Twitter Nathanius.
Excellent. And Katz, how about you? Where can people find more of you?
Probably on my stream. At the moment, I'm on a little bit of a break-ish. I stopped smoking cigarettes like 5 days ago, and I say I stopped, not quit, just so that people don't expect that I will quit, but I'm trying. So that means, like I'm like kind of like it helps with concentration and such, like nicotine does. So I really struggle to play StarCraft, and I'm also like cranky because you are what you eat, and nicotine is pretty good at that. So at like calming people down and such. So it's very difficult for me to play StarCraft right now, but soon I will restart and set some goals for myself. I want to try to get top 16 again. I am now low enough that I feel bad. So I want to make that grind back up at some point. And in the meanwhile, I got this new camera. In the meanwhile, I'm smoking some weed, so don't judge me. I'm almost done with that though. Like I'm almost finished with it. And I got this camera, and I will be streaming, just casual conversation, like sometimes like some deep conversation in the meanwhile, and that's what I'm doing right now. So that's twitch.tv/rootcats. Yeah.
Great. And Adrian, how about you? Where can people find more of you? What do you want them to check out or whatever?
On Twitter at Yogoliath, but nothing really right now. I'm in a startup called OmniSlash that's sort of in stealth mode. I do want to take this opportunity to call out some people.
Not anymore.
Well, we're kind of back in stealth mode. I want to call out some people that really helped. Like it was Tim and I's main goal through the whole last year to make the ESL deal happen, and it's really awesome that it did. But what's cooler than that is a lot of people have left Blizzard this year, and people like Adam Rosen, when he put in his 2 weeks notice, spent the last 2 weeks working on StarCraft and making this deal happen. Kim Fan spent her last 2 weeks working on StarCraft, and it's really was awesome to see all these people who have left who had all this passion. And then after me and Tim left, there's tons of people that made sure to push it through and make sure it got done. So Sam Braithwaite, Todd Belaski, Rob Breidenbecker, Jay Allen Brack, on the Blizzard side, and then like Sebastian Weishar, Mike Van Driel, Matt Weber, Sean Clark, Andrea and Tiso, just tons of people over at ESL and DreamHack. And I'm sure I've forgotten people. My whole team is awesome. I just want to say how much I appreciate you guys for continuing to create quality StarCraft content, and all the people at Blizzard and ESL and DreamHack who make sure that the esports programs keep rolling, and how awesome that is.
Yeah. Mike Vandriel, by the way, guys, is Adebisi. If you guys are not familiar with Adebisi, he is immortalized and made famous in a clip with Jeff in it where he's making it so that Adebisi talks as Destiny, because they kind of look like each other. They had the same goatee. So Jeff is directing Adebisi on how he should move his jaw. And then Jeff is making Destiny's voice as Adebisi does. That's fantastic. So if you can find that clip, highly recommend it. And this is the type of people that are running ESL.
StarCraft's insane.
Yeah, that's a good thing. They've been around.
Great. And last but certainly not least, Tim, I know you're not much of a social media guy, but what do you want people to check out or know or whatever?
Yeah, I'm still figuring out what is next for me. I hope it involves RTS, but it might not. We'll see. Yeah, my only sort of social media is LinkedIn, I guess. But you'll see me anonymously still playing StarCraft and trying to get better at it, and continuing to be a fan of what all of the folks who are carrying StarCraft 2 forward at Blizzard will do in the future. And it really is a great team. Can't say enough good things about the passion and the talent that team has.
Oh, I have a ninja question before we end to Tim. So it's been widely rumored that you have a Reddit account that you actually post on. And I've had a theory on who it might be. And I think I have you pinned down, okay? I think I know who you are. I'm not gonna say, but are we ever gonna find out, or are you gonna continue to post on Reddit, or what's the deal?
I have been known to post from time to time on Reddit, and it's actually kind of amusing how sometimes I'll post with the obvious benefit of some inside information, and people will just tell me I have no idea what I'm talking about and that I'm completely wrong. And I definitely get a kick out of that.
Yeah,
but yeah, I've been known to hang out on StarCraft Reddit from time to time. Guilty.
That's amazing. I love that. I had not even heard that rumor.
Yeah, I know who he is, but I will never say. Don't worry, Tim.
It's Pierre Delecto, isn't it? It's Pierre Delecto. That's some American political humor for you guys.
Oh my God, he's risky on Reddit. That's crazy. All right. Guys, this was just an amazing episode. Thank you so much for coming on, Tim. If you make a hero-based RTS, I promise to play it and love the hell out of it. Please stay in the RTS genre.
Please.
I'm trying.
Yeah.
Hashtag please Tim.
Hashtag please Tim. I'm behind it. Yeah, that's about it, guys. Don't forget, we have an episode booked for next week with Toby Lutke and TLO. Toby Lutke is the CEO of Shopify, who has been a StarCraft player in the past. So definitely check that out next week. And again, a big thanks to you guys. Wonderful episode. We'll see you guys later.
Shout out to the Pylon show, the greatest show on